wait.
Yeah, now it says we're being live streamed. Yeah.
Mhm.
Ready?
No. The owl's got to boot up. To give it. Okay, now again. Okay.
We can start now.
Okay.
Yes, we've got some coming out of here. Is somebody's mic on? Maybe your. Okay, the October 21st, 2020 meeting of the Corvallis School Board will come to order. It is currently 6:32 p.m. I am present in the boardroom this evening. Director Jones, Director Adams, Director Tomini, Director White Bear, and Director Aladrava are attending remotely, and Director Baker is excused this evening. Oregon law allows public meetings to be held entirely online. In the interest of public health and safety for all community members, especially for immunocompromised individuals and their families, the Corvallis School Board will continue to hold its meetings online. Public comment is available at some of our meetings. Information about how to provide public comment is available on the Corvallis School District's website. Additionally, the board's public meetings are live streamed on the district's YouTube channel, and a recording is posted to the same channel, typically the day after a meeting. I am grateful that this technology makes it possible for more community members to view and/or participate in school board meetings, given the flexibility provided by Oregon law. And because of technology issues and Wi-Fi and issues like that, some participants in the meeting may have their cameras off at times during the meeting. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will begin this evening's meeting with the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation work session, which will be led by Sammy, Ryan, and Lynn. So I will turn that over to you now.
Well, thank you, everyone. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Ashley Chavez. I'm currently the chair of the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation Board of Trustees. This is my second year as chair, and unfortunately I wasn't able to attend any of our joint meetings last year, but I have in the past, and I'm really happy to be here this evening with all of you. I want to take a second to kind of remind everyone here, if this is new to you or for folks watching at home, the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation and the school board usually meet twice a year for a joint meeting. And the idea is just to share information back and forth about work that we're doing and receiving your input on how you feel about that work. We do a little recap of some of the things we want to focus on that we've accomplished in the last 6 months. And then we usually have some discussion questions meant for everyone to help generate ideas and inspiration. And a lot of times that feedback helps us go speak with donors and with community members to help share the message of the work that the school board is doing. So that way we can have good community conversation. So here we are for our first one of this year. And with the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation Board, we actually have grown quite a bit in size. We have a large number of trustees. So what we do is we have half of our trustees come to one of the meetings and then half come to the other. So tonight, I just wanted to briefly share, folks will introduce themselves, but I did want to mention the folks that we have here. We have Rick and Mindy, who are both co-chairs of our development committee, and that committee focuses heavily on fundraising and a variety of events to raise brand awareness of our organization. We also have Tammy, who is our treasurer and has been treasurer for several years now. We're all really thankful for her service there. We also have Mike, who was our past president before myself and continues to be a hugely contributing member of our board. We also have Emily, who is one of the co-chairs of our grants and scholarships committee. So that group looks heavily at how we structure our grants, how much we're able to offer, and then works collaboratively with the board and the district to select applicants for those grants. And then also not only selects them, but also helps try to encourage a wide variety and diversity in applications. So that way we really make sure we're able to see a lot of great ideas from folks who maybe wouldn't normally have thought to submit. So that's something we've been focusing on a lot in the last year. And then we also have two of our brand new members, Wanda and Salam, and you'll get to hear from everyone tonight. And I'm just really thankful to have the opportunity to work with such a great group of folks. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll just kind of introduce a little recap of what happened at our last meeting. And I'll make this very brief since most of you were there, but not everyone was. So I want to make sure we just kind of have some groundwork from where we were at in order to move forward tonight. So the last time we were here, we talked about our Hands Across Corvallis event. Typically that's been an in-person event where we have, over 300 community members in the Corvallis High School cafeteria, and we have a big event. Obviously last year we did not do that, but we did have a virtual event. And we just shared how that was actually incredibly successful, even though it was very different from what it used to be and what it used to look like. And we really feel like we were able to reach a wider audience because of the virtual platform. We heard from many guests that they had never been able to attend before, and the virtual format allowed them to attend. So that was really exciting. And we surpassed our fundraising goal. We raised over $100,000 at that event. And so we're really looking forward to having that event again. And we feel we've got our feet under ourselves a little bit better this year now that we've experienced it at least once before. We also talked about at our last meeting, we had just finished up having a strategic planning retreat. And one of the themes that came out of our retreat was that when we did an analysis of our organization, we found one of the strengths that we all agreed upon was that there's a great relationship between the school board, the Corvallis School District, and the foundation. And so, one of the reasons we do this twice a year interaction is to keep that relationship strong, to make sure we still continue to have rapport and trust. And when we were in person, we would often have little breakout groups for discussion that often resulted in ideas that we were actually able to take forward and make happen. And so this time, even though it's short and not that frequent, is really valuable for the foundation. And I'm assuming it's quite valuable for the board as well, because we continue to do it and hear great feedback. So keeping the strength and vitality of that relationship is key for us. Last year, we also talked quite a bit. The timing of it was we had talked about investment in our summer programs, which we're about to launch because we met last in April. And I think the main point of that was that we've always had summer programs and they've always been absolutely critical and needed. But last year we discovered a new facet to that need because of COVID. And so we just had a really robust discussion about the need in our community and how education had been impacted in a way that we had never experienced before, and how we were trying to, be flexible and support our students, families, communities, and educators in that. So I think that was my favorite part of the last discussion. It just really generated a lot of great content for all of us. And then, of course, we had our discussion questions, which are listed here on the screen. We talked about celebrating success and proud moments from the year past, and then really focused on at that time the resumption of in-person school and addressing what student needs would look like moving forward. And as you can imagine, that was a fairly emotional, challenging conversation, just because it was a huge unknown. And look at where we are now. We've really come far. So I really appreciate the discussion questions and the robust participation from both sides. So with all of that, I'm going to turn things over to Mike, who's going to talk about our agenda for tonight. And Mike is here. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. So this evening's discussion is going to center around the Corvallis School District's racial equity policy and the Corvallis Public School Foundation's channeling of resources up to this point toward supporting racial equity efforts. After reviewing where we are, we'll shift the discussion toward the further collaboration and investment needed to most effectively move forward from this point on. The board will and school district will describe that program to us.
So I would like to share a few things about the work around Corvallis School District racial equity policy. It's work that has been going on for a while, even before the board started talking about this work in terms of a policy. Our staff, students, and administrators has been doing the work and helping the school board understand and have a better grasp of what does it mean to truly have an equitable system in our schools. So I want to really mention something very phenomenal that we've done in the past years. We committed a full year to develop our racial equity policy, and we did commit to that work, not top down from the school board, but really to listen to our students, listen to our administrators and teachers, and have a student-centered approach to understand what does it mean to have an equitable environment in our schools. So the school board sets an equitable systems goal, and then engaged in a full year of community engagement during the board meetings and also outside the board meetings, where we would have feedback on different sections of a proposed policy, refining it. And eventually we end up with a statement of commitments and a statement of actions. And I would encourage anyone to go to a policy JBB for Corvallis School Board and read that policy. It's something we're very proud of, JBB and Corvallis School Board policies. And it guides us to continuously do these actions and commitments in every single approach and every single dimension in our educational system. So that's basically the background on how we came about the policy and how we developed it. Now, I want to mention something very important. Next slide, please. About any policy. Policies can be divided to two. There is standard compliance policies. Usually they're driven from the law, driven from really how you keep your lights open per se. And there are transformational policies. This is one of the transformational policies. It's designed to fundamentally change the system, and it's intended to dramatically improve district performance and eliminate the achievement gap. So when you see in our school board goals a commitment in our equitable system goal and in every single goal to make sure that students' identity in all dimensions does not predicate or should not predicate or predetermine success in school, to translate that goal into strategies and into actions and commitments and ascribe it in our policy. The racial equity policy helps us accomplish that. And we're very confident and proud of this work because it's been driven by conversations with our communities of color, students of color, and educators of color as well. Next slide. And now I want to really highlight the important aspect of if you want to walk the walk and you want to ask someone about their values, you need to look into their budgets. And I'll hand it over to Ryan to really highlight, or actually this is the foundation, correct? I'll hand it over to the foundation to really share with us how you're helping us and supporting our work. Sorry.
That's all right. Thanks, Sammy. This is Mindy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a list of key initiatives and projects that the foundation has funded over the last several years. And we're going to go into more depth really about what each of these is about. I'll talk a little about the board training on the next slide, but just want to, at a high level, we've got 5 big projects, programs that we're really excited about getting them out there and deployed. And we are going to hear what kind of difference this is making in our schools in CSD. And we're also very excited. RCN Rivero Cachi's here with us, and you all know her, I'm sure most of you do. And she's been an excellent partner and leader with the foundation and helping us figure out where we can best apply the resources that we are able to pull together to support CSD along the racial and equity and inclusion vectors. So stay tuned because there's some cool information coming. Let's move to the next slide. So we just completed a 3-session training. I say we, this included the Board of Trustees. There were actually several people from CSD, leadership team, Ryan, Sammy. I think Sarah was there. I'm gonna probably miss a few people. We also had we invited the Old Mill Center for Children Board to bring some people along, and the Benton Community Foundation, really with the goal of this is a community effort, and it's a conversation that we really want to put front and center in everything the foundation does. And we see that happening with the school board and with CSD leadership. So this is really just building upon some things that have been happening, even as Sammy alluded to before the policy was in place. The conversation has been going on, and that the title of this long talk really kind of alludes to that. I mean, this is not something that is one conversation. It's a conversation that's ongoing, and it can be challenging. It can be uncomfortable, but it's very, very powerful. And we all got to experience that, those of us that were in the training over the last 3 weeks. And I'm not sure what next steps are in terms of more trainings like this, but we definitely have access to a lot of very good resources to help each of us have a personal connection with having that conversation wherever it may be. But I know it's helped the board, the foundation board, really talk more openly and clearly about the work that we do and how it's going to support racial equity in our schools. So pretty exciting and really powerful. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, I think, Emily for the next slide. Looking at my notes here. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. So Libros para Todos, it's one of the projects that the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation is really proud to have supported in the 2018-2019 school year. We invested $11,000 in Spanish library book collection at our 4 dual language immersion schools, Garfield, Lincoln, Linus Pauling, and Corvallis High School. We accomplished this by sending librarian Ted McCann to the Guadalajara International Book Fair. This book fair offers an opportunity to access materials in Spanish that are not available for libraries to purchase in any other way. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Tammy.
Are you there, Tammy?
Tammy, can you unmute?
Oh, I just did the whole thing and muted, sorry. Thanks. The SAFE program, over the past several years, we've helped the district establish and grow its SAFE program. SAFE stands for Students Advocating for Equity. SAFE gives students an opportunity to come together to learn and engage in courageous conversations about race. And next slide, Marcienne.
Thank you so much, Tammy. And it's just such an honor. My name is Marcienne, and I'm just so grateful to be here. I want to thank both our school boards, the school board as well as the Corvallis Public Schools board, working together and collectively. And I guess before I talk about SAFE, I just wanted to briefly say that I just appreciate the congruency in our work. And I think Sammy spoke earlier about the importance of our beliefs matching our values and our actions. And so I think in these next slides, you will see that collective congruency between all of us. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for the great work that you're all are doing. It makes my job really easy. Here we've got 3 amazing pictures, and I can talk forever about SAFE, but like Tammy said, SAFE stands for Students Advocating for Equity. And we started Students Advocating for Equity because when we think about research and we think about what it means to amplify student voice, we know that by doing that, it improves school climate, it improves the mental health of our students as well as academic achievement. It also increases grad rates and a sense of belonging. So what you can see here is on the left, the picture on the left, is you can see our first group that started back in 2017. We had a small group of high school students that came together in a brave space to talk about relevant topics that were important to them and to also work on building based projects that really were important to them. And what you can see now at the bottom right-hand corner is our current group of SAFE students. I love each and every one of these students and their SAFE coaches. We have expanded SAFE to, again, like I said earlier, started in high school. We expanded it to middle school. And this year, with the support of the Corvallis Schools Foundation, we will expand it to elementary school. So just very, very grateful. And our first SAFE group met just last week at Corvallis High School, and there they are. So there we go. Next slide.
As soon as I can unmute. Thank you. Thank you, Marcienne. Good evening, and thank you for having us with you. My name is Rick Wallace. And we wanted to highlight the fact that in the fall of 2020, we invested $20,500 in racial equity coaches at each school building. These coaches support the school's staff in ongoing professional learning and collaboration to disrupt systems and structures that historically have marginalized students and communities of color. The work of these coaches continues this year, and the inimitable Marcy will give you a few more details.
Thank you, Rick. That was so nice. Wow, our racial equity coaches, what we have going on so far, it's real exciting. We have 1 racial equity coach per elementary school. These groups, these educators are such a dynamic, caring, collaborative group that really understand the impact of this work on our BIPOCs, our Black, Indigenous, and students of color. And they are coming together this year and for years to come to do a couple of things: to implement SAFE at the elementary school, so again, students advocating for equity, and to also create spaces for students to come together and work on those building-based projects. And again, these are projects that are really relevant to them, and to implement SAFE, and to also support teachers and staff in digging and leaning into courageous conversations and working together to create a culturally affirming school environment. So those are our racial equity coaches, and just so excited that we have one in every school.
I think we need to go a couple of slides ahead, don't we?
So last fall, I'm Wanda, and last fall we invested $10,000 in leadership development and a career advancement for staff of color in our school district. Participants have had access to leadership seminars and other professional development. Marcianne will tell us some more about it.
Yes, thank you so much, Wanda, and so great to see you. Our Aspiring Leaders program really came from a place of wanting for our leadership in our district to really reflect our diverse student population. So we started our Aspiring Leaders program with the support of our teaching and learning leaders, Amy Leeson and Nikki McFarland, as well as two of our other building leaders, Salvador Munoz and Alicia Huertzate. And we have started last year. We created a space, really invited our staff to come together and create a collaborative space to be in community and to be able to work together, build relationships, build trust, and really work together to develop our collective leadership and really lean into and support each other in our leadership aspirations. We currently have 18 staff cross disciplines that are part of this group, and we continue to meet monthly and learn together, grow together, and really create a space for our future leaders in our district. So it's very exciting that we have this program underway in the Corvallis School District.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Salam, and I am a new member of the Corvallis Public School Foundation. And last year we have provided about 20,000 for culturally responsive and racially conscious reading material. And Marcianne will talk more about it now. Thank you.
Hello, Salam. So good to see you. This one is really dear to my heart as a former kindergarten teacher. I love books. And the reason we really wanted to build our materials, our books in our system were twofold. Number one, our classroom libraries didn't really represent the diverse books that we wanted to see in our classroom libraries. And so we wanted to increase the number of diverse books that students had access to in their classrooms. And so prior to that, though, I wanted to talk about these two seminal books that we purchased with the support of the grant through the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation. And it's stamped by Ibram X. Kendi, as well as this book is Anti-Racist by Jewel. And we purchased, through the support of the grant, we purchased these books for all our secondary and high school, or middle school and high school schools throughout our district. So our students, as of last year, had access to these books, not only in paperback copies, but also in ebooks. And so teachers have been using these books, students have access to them, and it's just been really exciting to see these books in our libraries. We also, through the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation, like I said earlier, wanted to increase the number of books that were representative of our community. And so we did early on last year send out a call out to our teachers and ask them to provide us with a materials request of books that they wanted to see in their classroom. So over the course of a couple of months, we had close to 40 elementary teachers reach out to us and send us a wish list of books that they wanted to increase increase their diverse book collections in their classrooms. And a couple of the beautiful titles, and I looked through the list before I came here tonight, and there was way too many to share with you, but a couple that really stood out to me were these beautiful titles: Black Elk's Vision, A Lakota Story by S.D. Nelson, as well as The Highest Tribute, Thurgood Marshall's Life, Leadership, and Legacy by Kekla Magoon. And these are just two titles of many titles that are now in our classrooms and our students have access to. I was just at the Garfield Library the other day, seeing the beautiful books that Profe McCann is adding to his book. And I saw some of these books in his library. So it's just so neat to see this idea of a book request coming in from teachers, having the support from the community, and actually seeing these books in the hands of students. So again, thank you so much for the ongoing support.
This will lead us into discussion. Again, when we come together and we're in the same spaces with one another, it gives us the opportunity to have small groups and then doing some sort of larger share out. That's not always the case. Actually, that's not the case with regards to where we are today. So we had a couple of questions that we wanted to gain feedback from both the school board and the foundation, having had the opportunity for the foundation to share their support for the racial equity policy and the work that's been happening, as well as their ongoing growth. That gives us an opportunity to lean into a conversation or begin a conversation with a couple of key questions. And so with the next slide, the questions that we'll be having the opportunity to discuss are, what are next steps and areas for continued collaboration? And are there strategies that need ongoing investment? And I think both of those questions are important for both groups to be able to talk a little bit more about, primarily because when it comes, the word that stuck with me from the presentation tonight was congruency. And I see a great deal of congruence between the work that the school board's doing, the foundation's doing, and this is one of two opportunities each year for everyone to come together and have conversation and to highlight where there is congruency and where there's the need for ongoing support. And so with that, I'm going to give you an opportunity just to start to think about those two questions and to be able to share back and forth some additional information. Sammy, I see that your hand's up.
Yeah, and as we think about these two questions, I want to highlight some source of strength of having the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation as an integral part in our community and educational system. One thing that we found very supportive in the summer programs, for example, that we have invested in summer programming as a strategic direction for years. And as the state came in with extra funding, we were able to have the flexibility, we were able to have the ability to pivot quickly. So the funds from the foundation helps us to do the work well. And when the funds are not available from the state, we can have that support. I hear from other communities across the state that they say the state might require lots of documentation or reporting or very strict ways of where we should fund our programs when the money comes from there. That's different when we work with the foundation. We have flexibility, we have adaptability and ability to collaborate quickly and address the critical needs of our students. And similarly, as we work on equitable systems, we're very grateful for that partnership and those sources of strengths of this partnership.
And so within this time together, we have about 15 minutes to start this conversation. And then from there, we're going to transition into what do we want to talk about next time we meet. So we've had some information shared. This is the heart of the conversation that will lead to where do we go from here, as well as what are some topics we want to cover when we come back together this spring. Lou, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be brave and and hop in first. I'm just like sitting with all the information. I'm like, wow, that's so amazing. Like all this stuff and so collaborative with students to find out what their needs are and make sure that that's what the focus is. Because I think a lot of times, sometimes as adults, we know what needs are, or we think we know what needs are, and sometimes it isn't in alignment with what the students, what they're experiencing. And so I really appreciate that collaborative work with students specifically and how they're experiencing education at this moment in time. Because honestly, none of us have. We were all in school in such a different time. So anyways, that's my long intro talk to also say that I think like when I think about next steps, I'm like a lot was done, but we haven't really been able to see it in full motion. So continuing to support the efforts that were started with the funds, how the funds were invested, like continuing to support what was started to see how it can grow, I think is an area for continued collaboration in those next steps. I don't know how far out you want me to think ahead to, Ryan, because I like to think way out and think about long-term impacts versus like just the next few months or this year. But I'm also thinking about the way that we can continue to support intersecting identities as well. So students experiencing houselessness and students from the LGBTQI2S+ community, like how those identities and experiences might come into play. And students, I think we do have some focus on students with disability already, but I think the experiences of the intersecting identities could also help tell a story a little differently. So anyhow, hopefully that makes sense, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, there's so much potential to just grow, and I can't wait to see the impact of what's been started with these initial steps.
Thanks, Lou. I know that from the previous conversations we've had with the board, with the foundation board, short-term and long-term vision is valuable as the foundation continues to think about what are those next steps for them as well as for the district. So I think both are important. So Vince, go ahead. I see that you have your hand up too.
Yeah, and so I have a couple thoughts on these prompts, and they're kind of related. So bear with me. This is a little stream of consciousness. Well, I'm just deeply appreciative for the role that the foundation plays, and I just want to highlight the situation that the school board is in. I mean, the reality is that across the United States and in Oregon, we do not fund schools sufficiently to meet the demand that society is expecting. And the foundation provides us with the ability, our community, the ability to be nimble and start really moving the needle on this work, this equity work. And I can contrast us to even other communities in Benton County, but elsewhere in the state that don't have the privilege of a partnership like the district has with the Public Schools Foundation. So it just allows the district to be creative. It allows us to do things that otherwise would not be possible. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. To the point, another thing about school boards is that we're a decision-making body. Even the way we structure our meetings is really centered around very linear and decision-making processes. We are not well equipped to do formative processes, creative processes. And I think that that's a role that the Public Schools Foundation can really help us with. And this really what you're already doing. And something that the school board is investing some time in this year is in community engagement. And I can just see that the Public Schools Foundation can play a role in creating opportunities for safe engagement, to create opportunities for our hard to hear communities and bring them into our process and do these formative processes and these creative processes so we can get a sense of how to move forward. And the word needs assessment comes to mind, but I think it's beyond that. It's how do we amplify those voices so we can hear them and bring them into our decision making. So I know that was kind of a stream of consciousness response, but I really do appreciate that the partnership with the foundation and allowing us the flexibility to do that work where the school board is not very well equipped just because of the nature of our institution.
Sarah.
Yeah, I echo Vince's appreciation. One thing I was thinking as we went through the presentation, as we talked about the support for building leaders who are leaders of color, one thing I was thinking of is then we need to fill those spaces in classrooms with teachers of color so that we're not, having the leadership look more like our students is great, but I don't want to do that I don't want to not move people up, but I want to fill those spaces so that classroom teachers look like our students also. So I don't know what kind of role the foundation could do. I mean, hiring them is the school district's job. How you hiring teachers that look like our students is the school district's job, but finding a way to help support those new teachers as they come in and maybe coming into a community that may not feel like you've always been their space. I can imagine, being a difficult situation for some new teachers who are people of color coming into our community. So that's sort of what I was thinking. To keep the pipeline coming and support new teachers coming in.
Thanks, Sarah. So now we have two of the foundation board members, Ashley and Mike, with their hands up. Ashley, do you want to go ahead and go first?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to appreciate the feedback. I've been taking a lot of notes. I bet others are too. But one thing that really comes to my mind when we talk about continuing collaboration is I feel like when we are looking strategically at our goals and the programs we're coming up with to assist, what's helpful to us is hearing directly from you the areas of priority that you want us to go seek funds for. And we take that direction from the actions we see you take, kind of like we were talking about a little bit earlier. But it's really helpful for you to keep us in mind as things develop and change throughout the year, since we do only typically meet twice a year, although we have, thankfully, Sammy attends as a liaison to our board meetings. That's so helpful for us to hear the kind of work you're doing and hear those updates from Sammy and Ryan, because that's what we keep in mind as we start to develop our programs and our grants and scholarships. And when we hear the challenges you're facing, we're trying to come up with creative solutions for it. But mainly what I think Vince was getting at this a little bit too, we can be a different kind of connection to the community by taking your message and speaking to them about it. But then more than that, gaining their support, their trust. And of course, what we do is focused a lot of times, not only on monetary donations, we look at lots of different kinds of donations, thinking about resource time, connections, support. When people are thinking about voting, all of those things, when they have that good reputation of the school district in mind and see the work that the school foundation is doing, I think it all ties together. So I guess what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is we continue to take our cues from what we see you do. But if there's ever times where you feel like you're lacking resources to tackle something, definitely that's the time to start reaching out to us, because when we can go to a donor with a specific ask, we get better results, hands down. When I say, hey, please support the school foundation, we do lots of great stuff, it works. But when I can go directly say, hey, let me tell you about your local school, here's what it looks like, here's the need, we tend to get way better response. So that kind of conversation is really helpful. And I just appreciate the back and forth that these two groups have and that we continue to build on it. I'm really, really thankful to work with all of you.
And we're fortunate to work with you too, Ashley. So thanks so much. Mike.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you. I'm just piggybacking a little bit at some things that both Lahui and Sarah made me think about in their comments, and Vince as well, is that we're talking about continuing these programs, and And as Louis said, we'll see more about the impact and not just have them be one shot in the dark, but to continue on, the importance of continuing to support those. And it feeds into what Sarah said about the pipeline of staff and teachers of color, because we need to create the appropriate image. And I don't mean image is a bad word, because that isn't always reality. Create a safe reality for those people so they're comfortable coming here, taking jobs and bringing their families to our community to carry on that need.
Thank you, Mike. Shauna.
Thanks, Ryan. And thanks, everybody. I'm excited to be part of this conversation as one of the newer board members and to be meeting some of you for the first time. So thank you for having this conversation. It was just really wonderful to hear these updates and to see both the commitment from the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation toward your own learning and growth related to anti-racism and equity work, and really leaning into that work as leaders yourselves and getting that training and building your own capacity, as well as then centering this work around being student driven and educator driven as well. And I think that that's really what makes this meaningful, is filling those gaps in a way that addresses the real needs that are coming out in real time in that nimble way that you're able to. And so when I think about those strategies that need ongoing investment, I think this has already come up from a few, that so many of the things that are being invested in right now in terms of sustaining them and making sure that they really have a chance to reach their full impact, not just now, but building trust into the future. It seems that many of the investments on the table right now are those that could potentially really require long-term support. And so thinking about that in terms of feasibility or long-term support for those. And also while balancing the thought around making sure that decisions that are made continue to be student-driven and staff-driven. Some of the things that are coming up in the community that we're hearing a lot about, in addition to racial equity and equity work in general, is just concerns about the social and emotional and mental health and well-being of students across the board, across all ages, especially given the past 18 months that we've experienced. And along with that, staff and concerns about staff burnout, staff mental health and well-being in all that they're carrying and juggling as well. And so, Ashley, to your point about thinking about what are the emerging issues that might be coming out that you might carry to other donors or might be able to carry in the community, those are a couple of things that I know I've heard about, and I wonder if other school board members and staff have as well, in terms of being potentially priority areas. Thank you.
You. I actually I'll just piggyback on what Shauna talked about. And I think as I look at the ongoing support that the foundation can provide the district, I think a lot about the fact that we're not through the pandemic yet. And we also have talked consistently that we have to think about the two years following the pandemic. And so as we think about those supports that have been in place for people, to recognize that those are still necessary, and that at this point, people are in a different place. It's been amazing to have kids back in school and to have them with us. And at the same time, for staff to be back in buildings, also trying to balance not only what their experiences were like before, but also continuing to juggle everything that comes with the pandemic. And so as you think about our students, I'd also encourage you to think about our educators and support for them as well, because I see that's as something that we'll need to continue into the future. Therese, go ahead.
Sorry, Ryan, did you say that I could say something now?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you guys cut it just a second there. So I just wanted to offer that something we can continue to invest in as a community related to interruption of education and the pandemic will be the ongoing needs of our most vulnerable households. I know the foundation did a great job of working to bring additional resources to those families. It's really, I think, important for us to remember that a lot of the federal programs that were intended to support households are moving on, not coming, those programs are not continuing. There, continues to be an impending housing crisis for families as we watch the courts battle whether or not eviction moratoriums are going to expire or not. And so just, whatever, I think this continues to be something we need to keep in front of the community, particularly because we may be under the impression that things are returning to normal since our kids can go to school. But of course, the effect of this is going to be with us for quite some time. So I think that's one way that if you're looking for direct ask is how do we keep our kids housed? How do we keep lights on? How do we keep their parents and their households able to access medical care, dental care, things like that, while they continue to work towards stability. And so that actually brings me to a question, which might be a suggestion opportunity. I'm not exactly sure, but for something that I am curious about, which is how much work does the Corvallis School Foundation do, or how much collaboration do you do with other providers in our community who focus on these targeted issues like affordable childcare, housing, things like this, other issues that we have brought up over the, in the past months and even a couple of years, really. I don't know how much sit down deliberate collaboration there is with helping to stretch those resources a little bit further. But I know that one of the things that often happens for households is that they leave benefits on the table because they don't know everything that is actually available to them. And so if they don't know what question to ask, then they don't get access to something. And so one of the things that I have, been doing in my work is trying to help families make sure that they don't leave something behind that could be helping support them and help them to be stable. And in order to do that, of course, there's a minimum level of education about what's actually available that is needed. And so I guess it's a question of, are you already doing this work? And if you are, is there a way we could deepen those ties so that we can invest our resources through the Schools Foundation into places where there isn't another resource, because we would know where to send folks if they have need, and there is a place that can meet that. And then of course there's stepping in when those resources fall short, which is a separate thing. And I think the foundation did that very well early on in the pandemic, serving families. So that is really the only thing that I would add. I will end with just saying how much I appreciate the commitment that you guys bring. It's a lot of work to engage a community. And I know you all have a lot of other things to do as well. And so you're a small staff and a lot of volunteer hours, but really it's a big impact that you guys are able to make. And so thank you for continuing to take that on. And and I will stop there.
All right, Leith, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, Teresa, I just wanted to respond directly to that since it was a fantastic question in terms of how much do we reach out to other groups that are doing similar work or trying to provide for basic needs of kids and families in our community. And I would say you hit the nail on the head. We are small in terms of staff. We are large in terms of volunteer hours and incredibly dedicated champions of public education. So we really lean on the fantastic work of the school district in this area. And I would just highlight the family outreach advocates who are constantly in touch with families and staff, counselors, other specialists across our 13 schools, and trying to efficiently get supplies and needs met for families and referrals taken care of. We just really try to serve as an effective mouthpiece for that work and to communicate where resources would be helpful. So yes, it would be fantastic in the future if we can deepen conversations with other nonprofit organizations or agencies in the community. And that's definitely a great long-term goal. But for now, we lean on the great work of the school district.
Thanks, Leith. And then we're going to go to the last slide now. And so I'm going to leave it with you.
All right, so that's me again. Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you for having us again. And the time really flew. And I would say this was one of the richest conversations we've had between our two groups. And it'll be even richer when we can be in the same room again. So yeah, I just want to highlight again the incredible volunteers that we have in our space tonight. Not only the foundation trustees who, as somebody noted, are really committed to personal growth and deepening their understanding constantly of how to be of assistance in our schools and community, and also the school board members who are also fantastic volunteers. And all of you together, I would say, are some of our greatest champions of public education in Corvallis. So thank you for being those people. And thanks for this opportunity to keep the relationships vibrant and strong, and to deepen our familiarity with the racial equity policy that you spent a year developing, and Sammy's great description of what a transformational policy is. And I hope that we can continue to bring that policy to life and have it be meaningful to our students and staff every day. So I'm inspired by this conversation. I hope you are too, and any listeners tonight. Some themes I heard tonight that I will carry forward: creating culturally affirming school environments, continuing to create congruency, working to address the needs of students with intersecting identities, continuing to strive for meaningful community engagement, and creating opportunities to hear the voices that are often hard to hear. Amplifying the voices of those people, I guess is what I meant. The recruitment and retention of teachers and staff of color, and addressing staff burnout and mental health and well-being. And with all of this, thinking in terms of a 2-year time frame. Finally, the vulnerable households who are going to be running into severe difficulty as the eviction moratorium ends. And so continuing that work and trying to deepen collaboration with other providers in the community. These are all incredible reminders of why we do what we do. And so I appreciate this so much tonight. So we've talked about what we might discuss at our next joint work session, which is scheduled for April 14th. So far, we think that it might be valuable to talk about what lessons we've learned from the pandemic that we can carry forward, and what best practices or innovative strategies we might build upon. So I think that's it for me tonight, Ryan. I really appreciate everybody's time. And again, very grateful to all of you for creating this space for our two groups to come together.
Yeah, and also I'd like to just finish with Leith and her leadership. The work that's been happening over the last several weeks with the long talk, and all the work that's been happening to support the foundation's growth, as well as supporting the school district, is really phenomenal. And I know that it takes a special sort of leader to make that happen. So again, I know that as a foundation board, you know that you are in good hands with your leader, and I just want to reaffirm that, because again, the congruency is because we're all in this together, and that takes someone like Leith to make sure that happens. So again, thanks for being here tonight, and April is not far away, and we will be back together soon. So with that, and have a great night, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to everyone who from the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation Board, and to Leith for their work, and for Sammy and Ryan and Marcy-Ann for their contributions to a really valuable hour that could have gone a lot longer. And thank you to the community that's donated and has made it possible for the foundation to do the work that they do. It's educating our kids and supporting our families is critical work, and the donations from our community make it possible. So moving on, the next item on our agenda is the student investment account annual report. And we have time for public comment specifically on that topic this evening, but I don't believe we have any. So we will move on to Olivia and her information about the annual report.
So I don't have any additional information other than the report that was provided and is part of the agenda on board book tonight. A couple of notes I just wanted to make clear, and Melissa and I collaborated with staff to put this report together. The format is in an ODE template, and we answered all of the required questions in the report, and then some additional progress markers, which were optional as well. The board doesn't need to take any action to approve the report, but part of the requirement is that we submit to ODE minutes of the board meeting that indicate that we made the report publicly available, created an option for public comment, and that the board reviewed the report in a public session.
Does anyone have any questions for Olivia? Sammy?
Well, I have a comment, but also if Olivia would wish to comment on the comments, I'd like to invite her to do so. I want to highlight a very important section, a requirement in the report, which is a requirement that we need to engage with the community. We need to engage with communities of color specifically. And reading the reports, I can see two strengths there. First of all, acknowledging the challenge of the pandemic and how hard it is to engage fully as we wish, but also how really came easy to document the work that we do. It is what we do. We engage with the community. We don't settle on, let's just invest without really listening to the community. It's part of our design of our structures and buildings, where we have equity design groups for every building. It's part of our budgeting process. It's part of everything we do that we engage. So I want to call out the elements in the reports that highlights how we engage with the community. Our use of youth truth survey, which allows us to understand the climate and our students, where they are and how they feel and how we can support them. It's truly impressive. And I hear from other school board members in other districts, some who would say, this is too burdensome. You need to trust us on our ability of doing this work. We don't want those requirements to document. For me, I see this is an opportunity to document what we do and to celebrate what we do, and we share it. So I really want to thank you, Olivia and the team, for highlighting our engagements. And maybe with that, if you would like to maybe just elevate in this public meeting some of those community engagement work and how we perceive it to happen in the upcoming year as well.
I think one of the things that we were excited about this year is that Lynn Benton LBL ESD has acquired Thought Exchange for us to use as a district. And this is a new way to interact with our community. It's not just a survey, give us your answer, but it's the ability to, freeform write what it is that is important to you, and then have other people comment on those comments, which is a nice kind of way to kind of chain all of that together. And learn more about what is most important to our community. We've started it with staff, and we have more plans to use that with our community this year. So I think that's one of the ways that we're going to look to get more information, more data from all of our communities this school year.
I also want to just add a piece of context about the student investment account. So it wasn't long ago that we were hoping that this would come through as an additional source of revenue for us. Pre-pandemic, that was just such a huge change for the way we're able to invest in public education. And so I think it's also important that we, in terms of that community engagement, it's also the reminder in terms of how important this money is. This is like the biggest shift in public education funding since Measure 5. And it's an area that is ongoing and supportive of our work, and it will continue to be. So as people look at those investments that are in there, while the format is a template that we have to use based on what ODE's provided us, it really highlights some of the things that are happening now that wouldn't be possible without this support from the community and businesses in particular. So it's a big deal, and it's something that will go on after the relief funds are gone. It's something that will continue to allow us to change practice and to provide more support for our students. So it is, it's a significant investment and really important for our work.
Thank you. I appreciate you highlighting that.
Vince?
Thank you. So, I mean, I want to echo, you know, the comment from Sammy. You know, I just really appreciate the discussion here. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that, despite the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, you know, and we know that the district, you know, ours and across the state are stressed, trying to cope with the pressures of trying to keep kids in schools. You could see the thoughtfulness and the diligence in this report. And one of the things I really appreciate is that everything in here is closely aligned to the strategic priorities of the district. There's no ancillary, investments here. So I just really appreciate the report here and what we're sharing with the public. On the last question, there's this discussion about how we are stressed and how that we're really focused on pandemic response, and that, you know, we're not able to meet all the things that were surfaced in the needs assessment. And I'm curious, what are the things that are having to be set aside this year due to the pandemic response? And what can we expect? You know, what is the plan for bringing those things back online as we go forward? Really thinking about that 2-year plan.
I don't have that information. I wasn't part of the team that put that part of the report together. I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry, I didn't get this question in ahead of time, and I'm happy to take an answer offline, and that's totally fine.
I think the problem is that we want to do it all because
of course you do.
You know, because our kids deserve that, and they deserve the best of us. But what I think we're learning as we get deeper into October is that we can't. And I think what we're going to be seeing in the next few weeks are some peeling away of some of those things that are the norm for school, for our staff, in order to be better staff members, in order to be there for our kids in a way that is best for them. So I don't have specifics at this point, but we can talk, or I can email with you if you'd like me to.
And that's fine. It's just useful for the board and for the community to know that, you know, because of the situation we're in, that there are trade-offs, and that the district is thinking about that to ensure the sustainability of you know, quality education for our kids. And so just thank you for that. And thank you for the diligence of doing that work. I know this is a really stressful time, and I had lots of appreciation, and thanks for this report.
Shauna.
Thank you. I was about to jump in and I thought, oh wait. Thank you so much.
Robert was in charge to talk. She forgot she was in charge for a second.
So thank you for sharing these updates. And with this being the first discussion that I'm a part of that really addresses the student investment account and those funds. And I'm also, in my professional work, I do some contract work with the state, with ODE, and help support some large scale grants. And so I'm doing this kind of work in a parallel world for myself. And so that just got me thinking about what I was really reading in the report, as well as format. And so I hope that my comments come out as just wonderings and possible suggestions, but also recognizing the very real staff capacity challenges with so much else to do that sometimes meeting sort of just whatever is needed for a report to turn it in sometimes is what needs to be done. So please know that this comes from that place of just questions and wonderings from being a new board member and looking for additional details that you can take and carry forward or not as you see appropriate. So as I was going through the report, I really appreciated just the mention of different community engagement pieces or the different ways that feedback was being taken into account, as well as just addressing what's possible and what's not with the pandemic. And I also found myself looking for a lot of different details that I couldn't find here. So I went back to the original proposal for how the funds would be used to really look up what were the goals, how has that changed over time. And I know in my own reporting work, oftentimes I go through and put in a lot of details around, okay, how many feedback sessions, with whom, what were the ages of students, which families, when, and ultimately that can serve as a very helpful record to go back and sort of check it against the initial proposal, but then what happened the next year and so on. So we sort of have that as a record. And so I was looking for some of those details and didn't see them in the report. And I know that may not be critical to have there, but just as a suggestion for one way that a running record could be kept. And something else that I've heard from ODE is how helpful that can be at times in terms of the more numbers that they have, when that's available, it can help them advocate for ongoing funding or even increased funding if they know where those gaps are coming in. So that was one of the thoughts I had, was around just gratitude for all that was in here. And I think for myself, in not knowing off the top of my head what this was in response to, I had to do a little bit of digging for additional details that might be helpful to include if it's easy to do so, but also recognizing the capacity challenges.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
So the next, so in November and in December, we will have presentations by our principals. In the past, we've done those as SIP dinners where we've rotated and talked individually. But this year, like last year, it will be collective. So it will be our elementary principals next month, and then in December, our secondary principals. So as you think about some of the investments that you see in this, I think it's important to sort of think about those in terms of what you hear from them, in terms of the actions that they're taking. And so I think that will help with some ongoing dialogue about how those investments are being utilized. So just kind of to put this as like one stage in a ongoing process of development and sharing.
Thank you, Ryan. That's helpful. And thank you, Olivia, and all of your collaborators on this report for putting it together. Oh, Luke, sorry.
That's okay. It blends in with the things sometimes. I think it would be helpful. I think Vince got to this a little bit, but just to like reaffirm and help the community understand, like there is a plan, like just saying there is a plan to meet some of those areas that had no change, especially because a lot of them have to do with like literacy skills and like understanding what it means to be on track in 9th grade and stuff like that. So that might be something we can hear a little bit more about in the future, is like what steps have been taken this year to help. It's not like I want to hear like a huge presentation of what that plan may be. I know you all have a plan, I'm sure, because that is what you talk about a lot. And I think it's just good if you could affirm to the community that those kind of updates are coming in. We all understand that last year was hard, and last year brought in a lot of things we weren't expecting, of course, because we're still in the pandemic. We don't know how long it'll last, and it continues to add layers of stress. But just like even little updates about those key areas where there may not have been as much change as you all hoped, because I know you all hope to have all these changes, right? As you already said, Melissa, you all want to do it all, but like even just having a little affirmation might be nice for the public to hear.
And that's good too, because a lot of times the no change click is kind of deceiving, because it might be no change because we're doing it and it's great. And it might be no change because we haven't even started it. So you're totally right on. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. I think that's important because sometimes people see and think there's a really negative impact happening if there's, yeah. So I appreciate you clarifying that for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? If not, then we can move on to the next item on our agenda, which is our bond update from Kim and Dale.
Good evening, everyone. So we're going to go through their update today, and I'm going to lead you tonight instead of Dale. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right in. We can go to the next slide. So we wanted to update you on GMP timing and targets. We have 5 bids that will be coming in the next coming few months, and wanted to make sure you had those schedules. So we have Sheldon coming to the board in November with a budgeted value of 3.6 million. Adams again in November with a budget of 13.9 million. Mountain View with coming to the board in December with 14.6 million. Franklin in December with 9.1 million, and Harding College Hill in January with 13.5 million. So we have a lot of projects and bids coming due in the coming months. And there's going to be regular decisions by the board to keep this work moving. If all of these projects come in within our budgeted values, we will end with $4.7 million in unallocated bond funds. And I want to say that we are cautiously anxious about this money because with uncertainties in the supply chain and labor markets, we are watching it closely. And we are working to make sure that we can get all of our bond promises done. And that is our plan, to complete all bond promises within designated bond funds. So let's go to the next slide. We wanted to update you on solar energy. So we have put together this chart of resiliency sites and solar maximization sites and educational arrays. So as a district, we have to spend 1.5% of qualifying construction costs on renewable energy. We've obviously focused on solar. So I want to quickly identify what a resiliency site is, and that is a pocket within our community where we have identified having a school in Southtown, Midtown, and north end of our district, where we would have schools that can not only generate solar power, but also retain power so that we can run in the event of an emergency. So we will have batteries at Lincoln and Mountain View, and at CHS we have a considerable generator that operates. We are also have that in the back of our minds that we should think about some batteries as we move forward also. It's not in the plan right now. So resiliency and operating in the event of an emergency looks like being able to have some minimum ventilation in our gathering areas, so gyms and cafeterias, running basic communication and technology functions in the offices, lighting for egress lighting. I want to remind you that we've designed our classrooms to have daylight and operable windows so that we can keep functions going. And our goal is to maintain or to resume school operations in the event of an emergency so our community can start regaining normalcy. Parents have access to get on with recovery. Solar maximization are our campuses where we're looking at partnering, where we have partnered with the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition to really look at the location. At Adams, we did the solar array in the field, and at Franklin, because of the roofing being replaced and the arrangement of the directional array, we're able to put more solar at that location. And you can see at our educational array locations, we prioritize having solar at every school so that students can learn from the function of solar generation, solar power generation. So it ranges from the 1.8 kilowatts up to 50 kilowatts, but every student will see that, and it will show up on their sustainability dashboard, which is exciting. So they can see the impact of the cloud cover, they can see the act of rain, of all the different things that impact solar generation. So this is super exciting. We wanted you to have it at your fingertips. So this will be published out. Next slide. So I mentioned the energy dashboard. So here's a sneak peek at the energy dashboard. So when you first log into the energy dashboard, you'll see the picture on the left, which is the map of the district with all of our logos. You can click on the school itself and be brought into the summary that you see at the bottom of the page, where you'll be able to look at electricity, solar power generation, water usage, gas usage, recycling estimates. That will have to be something that we estimate and put on there because it's not a direct reportable, but we're also monitoring what we're spending on irrigation. And so it's very user friendly. And then at the little blue section that you see at the bottom, there'll be a sustainability tip that every time you click on it, it brings up a new solar or new sustainability tip. So it's helping to educate users on ideas that they can accomplish and impact their footprint on the environment. And when you click on one of these tabs, you'll see a graph. It's not populated yet because we're still in that phase of building it, but you'll see the energy unit along the left and the timeline across the bottom. You'll be able to compare to other schools in our district. You'll be able to go pick your time frame, lots of functionality there. So we're excited to launch that. We with everything that our district has underway with opening schools and COVID responses, and this has been put on the back burner just a little bit, but we are still tracking to get this done in the coming months. So next slide. I wanted to highlight this sustainability signage. So at Lincoln, we have launched this in the front of the school outside as well. There is a Spanish version and an English version mounted at the entryway of Lincoln. And it highlights what the sustainability features are of Lincoln. And then throughout the building, we've highlighted specific features, for example, the water reduction or solar power, and they're located strategically through the building so students or community can see the water reduction item right there in front of them, read about it, and connect it to the actual operation of the building. So we're excited to have that out, and we are seeing students read them and understand it and ask questions. So we're really excited about that feature. We're working on just deploying this at Garfield as well, and it will be up at Bessie Coleman when it opens, and we will ultimately be putting this type of signage in all of our schools. So next slide. So the maintenance and project, we're working to make dreams come true. Construction is not easy, and the face on this little construction worker, it hasn't been easy. So I wanted to just say thank you to the staff and students and families that are enduring construction at Catherine Jones Harrison and Letitia Carson. We have struggled, and I say this just so that you're aware of it, we've struggled from having temporary heat at these locations and trying to balance that with the cold temperatures coming in. That's all due to supply chain interruption with the boilers. So the boilers are here. We're in the midst of installing them and getting them up and running, and we anticipate within the next 2 weeks we'll have permanent heat at both of those schools. So I think that the staff kind of feel like that with our clenched teeth sometimes, but they ultimately are here doing great things for students and showing true resiliency through this. So next slide. We're going to go through some pictures pretty quickly because I don't want to take up too much time, but there's so many exciting things happening. So I wanted to point out the solar array at Garfield. We just talked about the installation, and this has been a really exciting location where kids can actually see the array from underneath the panel. Next slide. I wanted to point out the outdoor learning areas at Garfield. It's just so exciting. On the left-hand side, you see the boulders. That was an important feature for our schools. They wanted to see natural play type items where kids can climb on the boulders. At the top is our raised garden beds in the new garden that we replaced. So we are working for functionality. We're partnering with the PTA, making sure that they get the irrigation systems that they're interested in, and really trying to make sure that it's still a school-owned project. Even though we built the raised beds, they're now taking ownership and making it theirs, and we are still supporting that through the bond. And then on the bottom right, this is, if you haven't been out there, this is an awesome thing to see. It's the garden on the playground between the new wing and the blacktop surfaces. So you can see it's depicting the valley, the Willamette River going through the valley there. And kids have been really excited about it. It's resilient plantings, native, drought resistant. And so kids can run through there. This is supposed to, all this landscaping is designed to be student friendly and play friendly. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I thought it'd be exciting to see a glimpse of the furniture in place. So on the bottom right-hand side, this is our new classroom furniture. And you can see that it can be configured in all different ways. I know that I spent a day out there with a few other leaders trying to figure it out. And, you know, it's so mind-boggling how many different configurations you can put together and the impact it can have on learning. It's very exciting. On the left is the art science room at Garfield. And the roll-up door that you see in the back of the room is still waiting for a supply chain interruption. The permanent door will be a glass door, but we're still waiting patiently. And in the meantime, we have this great space that's available for students to do hands-on learning in art. So that's very exciting. Next slide. On the left is our music room. And the wall, the shiny wall that you see there is the operable wall that opens to the gymnasium. And you see that in blue in the gym picture. The teacher in the space is so excited about the natural light, about the flexibility of the space. And you can see that just those stools that are bright colors just are so inviting for students to come in and out. So that's been a really exciting. In the gymnasium, something I wanted to point out, we did the seismic upgrades in this gym. So you can see the metal brackets across the top. We were able to take the paneling down in this gymnasium and refinish it. And it turned out just beautiful, keeping that original wood. And the lighting was upgraded. It's just such a brighter gymnasium than it ever was. And so just exciting things happening. So next slide. The library, all new bookshelves that match. They've got their story time areas. And the librarian, Ted, has just done so much work to put this back into operable condition. And so staff are really making these projects special for kids. So it's really important to acknowledge that. Next slide. So Lincoln, this is a picture of the dining commons. And again, we have that picture depicting Mary's Peak from Fenton Green Wildlife Refuge, and the alternate seating on the left and the traditional seating on the right. And it has just been a really great experience for kids. Next slide. The playground's open. Yay! I'm sure Lahui could tell us about kids out there enjoying that space. They did not like having it fenced off while we were under construction. And so now it's open and kids can enjoy, and our students are so happy to have that space available. And I want to point out on the right-hand picture, you can see the burgundy colored, it's called a glider, and it's a very inclusive piece of equipment. We can get lots of kids on that, three feet apart, of course. But they can be on the outside on that little ledge, standing to bounce that glider, and a student who has mobility challenges can just roll right up if that's what they want to do. So we're excited about the inclusivity of this playground. Next slide. So at Bessie Coleman, we are making great progress. We are tracking to be in the school, moving in over winter break, and that means there's a lot of work between now and then. So what I want to point out in this picture, this is the backside of the school, and on the right there is the oak tree that is really been an inspiration in this campus, and it is survived and it is beautiful, and the views that it provides out those windows are just amazing. So we're really excited about that. And so we can go to next slide. Just a little bit of pictures, what's happening in this school. So, we are, like I said, on track, and we're seeing all the finishes come together. The stairway is in, and we are just pushing to be ready for this. Next slide. I will mention on Bessie Coleman that supply chains are impacting there as well. We don't see any critical path for building materials, but we do have a load of furniture that's sitting in a ship off port that we have no idea when it will unload. So we have contingency plans. If it doesn't get here in time, we will use repurposed furniture interim so that we don't slow down our move-in due to that slow down. So at Crescent Valley High School, lots of things happening. I wanted to show you this picture because I'm not sure that that's one we'd shown yet. It's the parking lot where we've created ADA parking and access up to the campus. And so that is complete. That bus loop was in pretty bad shape and it was all fixed over the summer, which is exciting. No more potholes for buses going through. Next slide. And I just wanted to give you a few pictures. The metal shop is, we've moved in. It's not, there's no classes in that space until second semester. So we are taking our time to get that set up correctly, but very exciting space and it's going to be amazing for students. Next slide. This is the welding booths, which turned out just amazing. You know, you'll remember our picture of a facility planning person who could touch side to side on the old welding room. And now we have I think we have 8 booths for welding and they are just fantastic and lots of excitement from students and staff. Next slide. The woods area is just really special. And so we I won't say that we haven't had any challenges moving in because we've been working really closely with Adam Kirsch, the instructor out there. As you can imagine, the work is very technical in these spaces. And so as we've been in design really for a year and a half, 2 years on this, and it's now coming to fruition. So there's been a few little hiccups where we've had new equipment purchase and figuring that out and how it works with the existing design, but that's all moving forward and we're really close to being completed with that. On the right-hand picture, I want to point out, we call it the wood wall. And so all of those are different species of wood that are finished and they are engraved with their type of wood. So students can identify their woods. And an interesting piece is there was a mistake on one of the engraved pieces of wood. It was not correct and it was obvious that it was not correct. And Adam Kirsch said, well, it's not such a bad thing. That should be something students can easily identify and realize because of the labeling, but we are fixing it. But it was, you know, just an example of how we are moving through and making changes, but very beautiful. Wow. Next slide. At Corvallis High School, we are open for business and everything is going fairly smoothly. One of the supply chain issues we ran into were the roof panels for the covered walkway. And we were notified in August that we wouldn't see those until December. So we prepared the site to have nothing more than the support posts until we got those panels in December. And then Labor Day weekend, they showed up without notice. And so we pivoted, we made room to store them, and we worked with the school to figure out how to just install those panels while school was in session so that we didn't draw out and have to store and risk all kinds of things with these roof panels. So we're doing a section of the covered walkway at a time to minimize impact with students, and it seems to have been going smoothly, but we're excited to see that covered walkway coming to fruition now. Next slide. So the covered work area, oh my goodness, has come together so quickly. So you can see on the left is the picture from September and on the right is the picture from October. We've got the paint on, it's finished, it's amazing, and it's providing an awesome space for students. So next slide. The Sheldon Library is open for business. We do have this supply chain is very directly related to COVID. We do not have the circulation desk yet. We worked to find all kinds of suppliers, and we had a small company that was providing that, and they were directly impacted by COVID. And so we are working with them. And, you know, the librarian, Sarah, has just been so excited about the new space. We got her a sit-stand desk that she could use in the interim, and she has been making it work, and lots of positive attitudes and enjoying the furniture. There in the back, you can't see it very well, but there's these rockers in that space. If you get out there, you got to try the rockers because they're amazing, and kids sitting them and reading, it's great. Okay, next slide. So Mountain View Elementary School. I don't think that we have done a design update on Mountain View, so I'm going to take a few minutes here and talk to you about Mountain View. So this is the site plan, and there is a lot of site work happening at Mountain View. If you're familiar at all, this area, I can't use my pointer. So the area to the left of the Softscape playground along Grainger Avenue, that is a area that is right now playground, and we're remodeling that to become parking area. And we are making a new hardscape play area just south of the playground. This is really in response to relocating the office. And we are already experiencing cars on that playground. Even though it is a playground, we open it up before and after school for parent pickup and drop off. So it made sense to not be sharing that as a playground and a parking lot. Now, we also were looking at traffic flow and how to address backup on Grainger Avenue. So as you can see, we're creating a traffic flow that brings people in off of Elliott through the staff parking area and around the school, or you can access from Grainger on the east side of that entry. So these are all changes. Also adding a sidewalk connection to the crosswalks at the corner of Grainger and Elliott, and a paved pathway from the building out to their natural habitat area. So there's a lot of work that's going to happen, and all of this site work is going to happen in the second summer of phasing construction. So this will happen in the summer of 2023, but we're getting ready to dive into construction in June in the building. So let's go to the next slide and I'll focus in on the floor plan. So Mountain View has a huge campus, and you would think it would be easy to plan phasing. It is not. This is a tricky building to do construction phasing. We have two wings that are very far apart from each other, and this heart of the building in the middle that is just going to be so amazing when we get through construction. But the very first thing that I'll point out is that the office will be relocating to its new location in pink. The good news is that we're going to keep our existing office where it is through that construction process, and that's a huge benefit for Mountain View to be able to keep their office intact because it's such an important piece. So that new admin area is going to actually be an expanded footprint and take up a little courtyard space there. We're going to be really using similar structure as we are at all of our other schools and making sure that they have all the spaces that they need. The little brown space, number 17 at the bottom of the screen, is the new art science room. It's going to be open out to that playground area, which has the covered playground or covered play shelter is right out there so that they can support indoor outdoor learning with a covered play shed really close nearby. It's very exciting. We are doing updated bathrooms in the gray area towards the top by the library. Those will be our new student restroom designs. We're able to do that in one set of restrooms. The other one is going to just get a light refresh due to budget, basically. we need to make sure that we can fit it within budget. And then we've just got a lot of small changes that we're making in the middle of the building to create that student support space. Where the old office is will become the collaboration space. And we were able to create those spaces without expanding the footprint of the building, and it'll be adjacent to that library. And it's on the intermediate wing where it will get the most use from students who actually go out and can do those hands-on project or group projects. So we're pretty excited. Dale, did I miss anything on the footprint that you wanted to point out? No? Okay. Okay, next slide. So here's just a few renderings that we had with our design advisory committee. So at the top left is the view of the new office from the parking lot, which will just make a pronounced office. It'll be very nice. The top right-hand corner is the office rendering, and it is very much in alignment with what we've done at all of our other schools. So you can see the consistency from school to school. In the bottom left-hand picture is a picture of the entryway and how we're making a welcoming entry with bench for people to sit and visit while they wait. And then on the bottom right hand is the music room. So you can see on the right hand side there's an opening that'll open into the gym and lots of space and lots of storage. So we're excited about Mountain View. Next slide. Franklin, K8. And so this is the site plan. There's not a lot happening on the actual site to the exterior of the building, but the exciting piece that we were able to do is on the left-hand side, the south side of the building. We are putting in a door from the cafeteria / gym that will go feed out onto a patio, and we are fencing off that south yard area to create a space that the lunchtime can overflow into the outdoor space. It can also be used for indoor outdoor learning. lots of exciting things planned for that space, but it's going to make a huge difference for the way they can run lunches. Just as a reminder, this school is not getting a separate cafeteria. And I don't say that to be negative, but to say we're thinking about how to provide some of that same flexibility in a different way. This campus is small and challenged with how to, we didn't really have a good solution for how to add that space on this campus, but we're really thinking about flexible, adaptable ways to make some additional space for them. Okay, next slide. So this is basically what we've got going on here. So the locker rooms are in the darker gray and they're labeled A. We're going to be converting those existing locker rooms into science lab. So it'll be taking all of that space and making a larger classroom space that can be used as the science lab, as maker space, and lots of excitement from the staff, the science middle school science teachers. They've had a lot of input. They've talked about other schools that they like, and it's been a very collaborative process to come up with a design there. We're really excited about it. The library is going to get all new finishes. So we're going to be closing down the library actually at spring break to start working on those abatement and finishes in that space. So that entire wing there will actually be closed starting spring break, so we can get a jump start on the work here. And we're collaborating with the school team, and it's very exciting work. You'll see upgraded finishes throughout the hallways and shared spaces. So the gym cafeteria space will get updated. The restrooms that are there by the cafeteria gymnasium will be renovated to the new student restroom design. And that is a great location for us to do that because it is the center of the building for outside use as well as student use. All students use that part of the building. So we're excited to get that upgrade completed. The office itself will be fully renovated, and there's some great design features as far as flow and connectivity. They'll get a new staff room. And then adjacent to the staff room will be the converting a classroom into collaboration spaces. And so lots of opportunity to come with this. And we are excited about these changes. So I'm going to tell you that this design advisory committee was very engaged, as you could probably predict. They're very engaged staff, and they brought us so many good ideas, and the design evolved really effectively through that input and collaboration process. So let's go to the next slide. College Hill, Harding Center, College Hill. We received our updated estimates, and we did need to go through a value engineering exercise. We tried to focus on maintaining the educational programs and the bond promises. So as a board, you know that we had lots of discussion with the community about the parking lots. The parking lot, where would it go? What would it look like? And in the end, it looks like keeping the front drive-through area and adding some ADA parking on that. So there won't be any major changes to parking. As the facilities director, I'm a little bit sad about that because I think we need parking, but in the end, it's more important to keep our dollars focused on where student impact will be. And so we chose to make that cut rather than others. So I wanted to make sure you knew that, because we are gonna have that out to bid here, and actually in front of the historic preservation review will be coming up shortly. So we're really working towards that. The phasing and scheduling is tricky, as you can imagine. So we are doing a lot of weekly meetings to try to work through the phasing. Essentially what you'll see is the 2-story portion of the building closing down for construction, starting spring break, and then working through the rest of the building. We'll get the 2-story portion ready for College Hill to move in, then take on the rest of the building, and then move College Hill back to their locations and everybody else back in. We'll bid this late year. This one is the one that will come to you in January for award. So next slide. And this, I want to just point out that this picture is the mural for Bessie Coleman Elementary School. So this will be in the cafeteria. It's an amazing picture, and it's going to look amazing up on the wall. So any questions?
Sammy.
All right, I have a few questions and comments. First of all, thank you. Thank you. Really impressive presentation. I want to thank the staff, especially for their patience, and specifically those in Letitia Carson and Catherine Jones Harrison for their patience and endurance. It's truly trying times and hard times, and working through the pandemic to finish the work. Everybody is sacrificing, and I want to really echo what Kim mentioned in terms of the appreciation of that. And also, I want to say thank you for doing everything in your capacity to get the work done. Personally, I'm aware that the supply chain disruptions and production disruptions are across the board.
Sammy, you've frozen. Vince, do you want to go ahead and make your comments and we can bring Sammy back once he's unfrozen?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Well, I mean, I have a whole raft of questions and would love to discuss this report in detail because it's so exciting. Well, first, I want to express appreciation for just the resilience of the team, dealing with supply chain, disruptions, our staff being so resilient in, while navigating a pandemic. It just really underscores how this district can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, can build facilities in the middle of a pandemic while bringing kids back to school. It's just, if you think about it, you're doing triple duty where other districts are just trying to get along. So just a deep appreciation for the staff and the management team and the construction teams. My youngest goes to Lincoln. I've just really been delighted watching the progress on the external, the site work there. It's just really exciting. But I have to say, you guys know that sustainability is one of my key issues. And I'm just so appreciative that without any mention from this board or any pushing, that this team is focusing on sustainability and bring that. And, I'm reminded of a quote from Peter Drucker, who's a business consultant, longtime business consultant. And he said, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And I just love how you're planning to build a comprehensive data dashboard for our resource consumption. And it's really just that first step and critical step in managing our resource use and educating our children. And so throughout with that, teaching and learning has been part of that. And so I just want to express immense appreciation. I hope there's lots of social media posts about this, because I know there's people in this community that are going to be really, really excited about this work that you're doing, the sustainability work that you're working into the bond project. So thank you very much.
So Vince, we are planning a communication campaign around our sustainability initiatives that also focus on, we are getting questions, LEED versus path to net zero. What does that mean? So we are working on, that will be one of our first big communication campaigns here before, right at the first of the year.
Thanks for that. I really appreciate it.
Lou, or Sammy, do you want to go ahead and finish what you were saying now that you're back? Sorry, Lou.
I think you left again.
You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize. And I want to ask you, did you hear anything or halfway through?
Halfway.
Yeah, probably halfway. We didn't hear a lot.
It's hard to.
All right. So I'll just say I apologize if I'm being redundant, and also redundant with something Vince mentioned, because I connected halfway through. But really thanking the staff for their patience, and also our staff for their work during the disruptions. Some of these disruptions are beyond our control. So I wanted to acknowledge that, and really hope that's the permitting process and everything else that's within our control. We can do everything we can to get it through. But thank you for your work, and appreciation for the staff for this work. I saw the 50% milestone, and I know the percentage from what we spent to what we project can change as the projection may change, but it's really important milestone to celebrate in terms of financially. We're halfway through. It's just amazing to reflect on where we were and where we are right now and the path ahead of us. So just I want to highlight that. I echo Vince's excitement about the energy dashboard, and I hope that there is a technical requirement that is there, and it will be a feature that must be there. And I demand it very strongly, which is exportability of data in a tabular format. So rather than just seeing it in a graph, students can on their own or through computer science or data science the class in middle or high school or even college can download the data and do their own research or interpolation, extrapolation. So I think there's so much value of exportability of data in a way that students can play with it, or any community member can play with it and work on their own hypotheses or experiments. So please let me know if this is there, and if it's not there, please have it available. And the other thing, it's a question around the batteries. First of all, thank you for doing this work on the batteries and the solar energy. Thank you for the coalition and community partners for making it happen. I'm anxious about the resiliency of the batteries and the transmission lines themselves, reminded by the Japan 2011 floods and tsunami, where critical infrastructure lost their access to their backup batteries because the batteries were in the basement, and it was very unlikely to have that place flooded, but they flooded. So I just want us to think about, are the batteries located in a resilient location, given any adverse events, whether it is an earthquake, a flood, or whatever it is? And also, are the transmission lines from the batteries to where we can use the power going to be intact in such adverse events? And if not, let's make sure that we can make that happen for those that were installed already and those that will be installed in the future. So these are my questions, and this is my appreciation. Thank you.
Tackle the battery question, Sammy. They are in the mechanical yard behind the building. It's basically a masonry structure that's secured. They're in their own enclosure, so they're secured from weather. So they're not very low. They're no lower than the building is, and they are hardwired to the building. They don't go through external transmission lines. It's fed underground into the main building distribution panels. So it's a self-contained resiliency package there. If that answers your question on that.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Lou?
I mostly have a bunch of appreciation. And I loved seeing the new school names in the report. I just wanted to say that too. How they were all over the place in there. And seeing how many projects are almost 100% done. I can't remember which school it is. That was 99.5. Which school was that? It's one of, I think it's, never mind, don't have to dig for it. But they're so close, some of them, and some of them we're just seeing designs, and it's just incredible to see how much has changed and being able to since the last time we were able to visit the spaces, which doesn't even seem like that long ago. And to see how the students are being able to enjoy the spaces and everything, and just appreciative to all the work that everybody that has been on the projects, but also the community investment. I'm always blown away with how much support the community has given to these projects. And I just wanted to share that appreciation too. In the solar arrays and outdoor learning spaces, all these things that I know are going to impact students in the future in ways that maybe we didn't even think about, are not necessarily me, but we as in the district. And the one thing that I did have kind of a question about is I know the weather is also impacting some of the stuff. I think at Lincoln it looks a little bit super muddy, but and there's storms coming in. I don't think that's going to significantly derail anything, but maybe if you wanted to mention to the community, don't worry, it's still happening. I see them out there all the time. I'm sure other people do. And I had one question about crosswalk safety kind of stuff, and that's really specific, but the weather's not going to super delay things, right?
I'll touch on the site work. It actually, there is a discussion going on at the site level about the fields. We're just so late, with that grading there, that there's debate. We probably won't want to put the seed down for that field until March, which means we probably won't put topsoil over that rock. But those are discussions that are happening at the site level, in this week. So that's in an effort to save money and not have to do the work twice, but it'll also prevent a muddy mess all over the neighborhood. Other than that, the site work should be pretty well wrapped up, other than the remaining planted seed lawns. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing it that way. You don't have to do the work twice. I think that's important. If community's watching and doesn't see stuff hit that 100%, that it'll save time and investment in the future. And that's great for folks to know about that. I do have questions about some of the crosswalk safety, but I can email Kim about that later. Maybe that's really specific to the way that cars enter some of those areas. I don't know how other school areas are impacted, but at Lincoln, that crosswalk is the one that's goes to the new driveway from Alexander. Has a lot of I was really concerned the other day when it was foggy and there was low visibility and people were just pulling in without slowing down. And so there's a little bit of safety behind my wondering. And so I just when you were talking about the traffic flow, what school was that you were talking about, Kim?
At Mountain View.
At Mountain View, it made me think of that. And so it's at the top of my head and I wanted to mention it.
Yeah.
So I don't forget, but I can email you about that later.
That sounds great.
Thank you. And one more thing, if you all can just say thank you to the workers too, that'd be nice too. That we appreciate them.
We definitely do. They were and are doing a lot to keep our projects moving. Many sacrifices, including working off schedule, right? Like working after hours schedules it's a big commitment.
Yeah, now that school started, we don't occupy the buildings when the kids are there. It's after hours.
Does anybody else have a question or comment? I just want to add my appreciation to Tim and Dale and everyone who's been making these projects happen. It has been really exciting to watch things come. I went and poked around the landscaping at Garfield the other day with my husband, who's volunteering, I think, with some OSU students to do irrigation in the raised beds. And my moment of, oh, this is so exciting, as someone who at one point dug a 10-foot trench next to an apple tree to look at root distribution, was going to those raised beds and opening the windows where students will be able to see into the soil and see where the roots are growing and what's going on below ground, because that's a fascinating process with plants too. So those details of things like that just give learning opportunities to kids, I think are just so exciting to see and to think about the possibility of. So thank you for this work. So I think with that, we're ready to move on to the next item on our agenda. Unless people feel like they need, we've been doing this for 2 hours. Are we good, or do we need a break?
If it's possible to take a short break, that would be great.
Okay. Let's do a 5-minute break.
Okay.
With that, we are
Recess.
thank you. In recess. I need that 5-minute break. Vince and Sammy.
I'm back.
Hi, Vince and Sammy, I think I'm just waiting to make sure you're there. Sammy. Here we go. The meeting of the Corvallis School Board is back in session. So the next item on our agenda is resolution number 21-1003, Native American Heritage Month. So Luhui and Shauna, Tina also was involved in writing this resolution, but is not here this evening. Do you all have anything you would like to say about this resolution?
I think we do. Do we do the motion first, Sammy? That's what we did last time. That's why I was.
Yeah, motion.
Okay. Does anyone wish to make a motion to approve this item? The motion wording is in your packet. Vince?
Well, I raised my hand, but I'd like to defer to my colleague, Director Whitebear. I think it would be appropriate for her. I think it would be best if she made the motion.
Okay. Thanks, Vince. I wanted to make sure I had the wording. I move to adopt resolution number 21-1003, acknowledgement of Native American Heritage Month as submitted.
Second.
So it has been moved by Luhui and seconded by Sammy. I will now entertain final discussion.
Just much appreciation. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Luhui, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
I was like, it's fine. It was fine. I just wanted to say that this resolution means a lot to, I'm sure, a lot of community members, and really affirms the district's commitment to doing the work. And I know that Shauna and Tina and I spent a lot of time on this one, so appreciate everyone's patience with it getting into the packet, especially because we had a lot of other board business going on at the same time. And we wanted to make sure that people understood some of the history behind it and the importance of it, not only nationally, but locally. And I'm just really excited that as a board, we continue to engage in this work to recognize our students and our staff and our families that are being highlighted in these resolutions, and affirming that commitment to continuing to be in it with them and support them. And as somebody that's also part of the local Indigenous community with Indigenous children in the district, I understand, and I've talked about this before in board meetings, how hard it is to be represented in public education as Indigenous people, even to this day. And I hope that this is one step that we can take as a board to help with some of that. And I'm gonna get all emotional about it. So that's where I'm at with it. And I'll go ahead and mute now.
Sammy?
Thank you. Just much appreciation for Lou, for her leadership, and for the co-sponsors as well, Sean and Tina. And I want to say it's really important to recognize this is not a formality. It is a formal decision to celebrate the Native American Heritage Month for November 2021 and every November in perpetuity for the school district. And in addition to this formal action is the deliberate action of recognizing the work of Native peoples and really recognizing the things that are mentioned in the resolution. It's timely. There is much work to be done. There are other municipalities and governing boards and councils that are asking a question if land acknowledgements should be done or what we accomplished by that. And I apologize for highlighting this traumatic significance of a struggle and fights we need to continue to do. But I want to highlight that where we are here is important. It's work that we need to do within the district, and also outside, really sharing this important work and asking others to do it as well. And nothing is more important than being educators in our work and walking the walk. So really thank you for doing this work. And I hope that I follow your footsteps in recognizing the Native people and really elevating their voices. So really thank you for this work, and let's continue it.
Vince?
So once again, I want to express appreciation for the leadership of Director White Bear and the other sponsors of this resolution, and the ones previous and the ones that will follow. Some people might say that, this is it, talk is easy. It's easy to take up a resolution or make a proclamation, but the reality is that actions like these, it's the role of the board to set the tone for the district, and the work that we're doing now creates the culture for the board, for this governing body, and also for the organization, and that this will last, because this is something that we'll be doing in perpetuity. It will go on to the board's annual calendar, and Corvallis school boards of the future will be expected to observe, in this case, Native American Heritage Month and do the other cultural celebrations that we should do every year. And so I'm just really appreciative of this leadership and that we're taking up this work, and I'm looking forward to voting in favor of the motion.
Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you. I just wanted to share my gratitude as well for my colleagues, Lahui and Tina, for involving me in this process, and just how much I've learned even from being a part of 2 resolutions so far. And particularly this one, where one of the things that really struck me was that this is not a new movement. This is not a new action. This is grounded in quite a long history, and a little bit of that will be reflected in the resolution itself. And I learned tremendously from that, but also to encourage folks to learn even more beyond the resolution that's here. And also just to share my gratitude for the careful being a part of this process, just seeing how much time and care is spent in choosing every word in terms of making sure that the identities of students, educators, families, community members are really affirmed and recognized as part of the writing of these resolutions, and then the reading of them too.
Thank you. Therese?
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to say this is such a wonderfully worded, we're going to read it, so everyone's going to get to hear it. But it's such a wonderfully and thoughtfully worded resolution. And my hope for this resolution is that the sentiment of it finds its way into our curriculum, into our classrooms, so that we have some confidence as parents that the important message of this resolution and the important truths that it represents and the story that it tells is something that we can be confident our children will be learning from K through 12. So thank you for for putting this in front of us, for giving us an opportunity to share it, read it to the community. And now I hope that teachers will hear this as an invitation to advance this even further.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo my colleagues' appreciation for the work by Lou and Tina and Shauna in crafting this resolution. I feel like the wording of it is really important. It's an educational resolution, which I think is important for the school district. And I echo the importance of acknowledging these months and days. Living in Corvallis, we can also often live in a bubble where we don't, we're never are forced to acknowledge that not everyone has the same identity that we do. And so I think bringing up and acknowledging the heritage of all the people and the various people in our community is really important for our students. It's a way to acknowledge and see them. So it has been moved that we approve resolution number 211003. Oh, Lou.
I'm sorry, Shauna. I should have said this earlier, but I think it's important for the community to know when they hear the wording of the resolution. When we explain in Indigenous identities and Native American identities that some of the terminology is grounded in US-based like demographic and political identities. And that's why certain ones are called out and then it's expanded upon to be inclusive of other Native American and Indigenous identities. So I just think that's really important for a community to know like why very specific ones were called out to honor some of the ways that sovereignty comes into the conversations with Native and Indigenous identities. I just really, yeah, that's all. Okay. Then.
Thank you. So it has been moved that we approve resolution number 211003, acknowledgement of Native American Heritage Month. Director Jones, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Adams, what is your vote?
Aye.
Director Tomini, what is your vote?
Aye.
Director Whitebear, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Aladraba, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye also. It passes unanimously. Now, due to the importance of this resolution and as an opportunity to learn from the carefully worded and important messages that are in it, I would like Director Whitebear and Director Whitebear and Director Jones and Director Tomini to read the resolution into the record, and so that those who are listening can hear this resolution.
Acknowledgement of Native American Heritage Month resolution number 21-1003. Whereas the Corvallis School District recognizes and pays tribute to the significant contributions made in our community by Native American people, which includes American Indians, Alaskan Natives, and Native Hawaiians, as well as Indigenous people from Canada, Mexico, Central America, South America, and the broader Pacific Islands. And whereas the Corvallis School District affirms that Native American students, families, staff, and community members should be valued for all aspects of their identities. And
whereas Native American Heritage Month grew out of efforts begun by Dr. Arthur C. Parker of the Seneca Nation's work with the Boy Scouts of America in adopting American Indian Day in 1912. And whereas Reverend Sherman Coolidge of the Arapaho Nation, and then president of the Congress of the American Indian Association, first proclaimed American Indian Day on September 28th, 1915, then calling on the nation to observe this day. And whereas Red Fox James of the Blackfoot Nation traveled across the country on horseback to gain endorsement of 24 state governments to hold a day to honor Native Americans nationally before presenting it to the White House on December 14th, 1915. And whereas American Indian Day was first declared May 1916 in the state of New York, and whereas Native American Awareness Week was first proclaimed nationally in 1976, and whereas what was then called National American Indian Heritage Month was first proclaimed nationally in 1990, and
whereas the Kalapuya people have called the Corvallis area and the Willamette Valley home since time immemorial, and whereas the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians continue to maintain their ancestral and cultural connections to the Corvallis area and broader Willamette Valley. And whereas there are countless cultural heritages represented by Native American peoples, And whereas the state of Oregon has a documented history of anti-Indigenous actions based on colonization, which includes genocide, forced removals, deprivation, broken treaties, and the outlaw of Native American cultural practices. And whereas education has been misused as a tool of colonization in Oregon, serving to sever Native American children from their families, languages, and cultural heritages through boarding in residential schools, beginning with the Indian training school at Forest Grove, which later moved and became Chemawa Indian School in Salem. And
whereas Native American Heritage Month provides an opportunity to continue the district's growth in learning about the many contributions of Native American people to the nation, world, and local community. And whereas education is a necessary component for creating a more equitable and anti-racist community, nation, and world. And whereas the Corvallis School District has made a commitment to equity and anti-racism. And whereas the Corvallis School District has a responsibility to honor and respect the diverse histories of our community. And whereas the Corvallis School District believes each and every student must be celebrated and appreciated for the distinct and vibrant contributions made by sharing cultures, language, ideas, beliefs, and values within a school community. Therefore, let it be resolved by the Board of Education of the Corvallis School District does hereby proclaim November 2021, as well as each November annually, as Native American Heritage Month in the district, and strongly encourages students, families, staff, and community members to join in existing local celebrations, and
encourages all schools in the district to help highlight this month in great appropriate ways, as well as highlight the contributions of Native American peoples to the local community, nation, and beyond, both historically and in current times.
Adopted by the Board of Directors of School District Number 509J Corvallis of Benton and Lynn Counties, Oregon, at its regular meeting this 21st day of October 2021.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the Division 22 report and action. So Melissa.
It's really hard to follow that. I would just kind of want to sit in that for just a second because that's pretty amazing. And I also want to just say thank you to the board because without your push for us to ensure that we're doing this for our kids, I think that a lot of our staff would feel kind of hanging out there trying to do this, but they know that you have their back. That means a whole lot to all of them. So thank you for being there for our staff when it comes to how critically important it is for our students to be racially conscious. We really appreciate that. So thank you. Okay, Division 22. I have no PowerPoint slides. I have no pictures. It's just a compliance report. And if you read through the cover letter, it gives you kind of the summary. So just some important things to kind of point out as far as 4 major changes that occurred in June of this year from ODE. The timeline has permanently shifted to November. So for those of you that have been on the board for a while, this report has come in February. It's very confusing. So in November, it's really good. We can put last year to bed in November and then be done. The rule is, it explicitly states it's for last year. And so just a reminder, this is about what happened last year, not about what's happening this year. Although if we're out of compliance, sometimes we'll say we are going to be in compliance this year. So you see that in the report. We're supposed to be presenting this report to the community, not just to the school board. So we're here in an open meeting doing that. It will be posted on our website tomorrow morning after actions taken tonight. So anyone can access it, find it, ask questions, and make comments. And we're just like the SIA report, we're using a template provided by the state. So that's what you see in the attached report. The highlights include, if you go to the second page of the cover document, the last year, if you remember, we had a really modified year. We had very few requirements because we were reporting for the year that ended essentially in March as we went into pandemic emergency. So this report is now reporting on the school year where we started in comprehensive distance learning and ended in our own hybrid learning model. So we do have some requirements that were waived, including essential skills, and I think a lot of you are aware of that and have read a lot about that in the news and in ODE documents. The kindergarten assessment, for obvious reasons, because our kindergartners at the start of the school year were not in the classroom. And then the identification of talented and gifted. That doesn't mean we did not serve our talented and gifted. It means that we weren't identifying last year, and that has to do with the not having standardized tests from the year before to help us to identify tag students. Some modifications for this school year are listed also on page 2, including essential skills, again, being removed as a requirement for graduation. Health and vision and hearing screenings did not happen last school year. They were not required, so that was waived. PE requirements, time was waived, but kids were expected to have access to PE all through last school year. And I think you might have seen some really cool things that our Corvallis school, our teachers did for PE throughout the district. So there was a lot of really fun action last year in PE. Instructional time, you can read through that, some things that were waived and hours that were added on automatically. And then the last is adoption of instructional materials, which is something that we did with this board right at the start of the school year to adopt instructional materials for Corvallis Online. So we're in compliance with that modification. So as far as our district is concerned for last school year and the Division 22 report, we're out of compliance mostly in those areas that have to do with assessment, because this board decided that we would not be doing state assessments last year. So that puts us out of compliance with administration of state assessments. It puts us out of compliance for providing parents the opportunity to exempt their students from state testing due to disability, because there was no state testing to exempt their child from. And then lastly, the essential skill assessment for English language learners requires that we provide the opportunity for English language learners to complete essential skills in their language of origin. There were no tests, there's no essential skills. So again, out of compliance there. And then the other piece that we're out of compliance on has to do with dyslexia and the universal screening for risk factors of dyslexia. We chose last year not to do STAR testing, which is the vehicle that we typically use to universally screen for dyslexia in kindergarten. And that we didn't do any STAR testing last year because our kids were in remote learning, and we thought it was more important to take care of their social emotional well-being and then do as much as we can with content. So when it comes to the report, you'll see all of those places where we're out of compliance, but that there is a corrective action in place because we will be doing our state assessments this year. So all of those will be back in compliance. And with regard to the universal screener for dyslexia, we are going to be, we are testing already. We've already opened the STAR window. We've already started those universal screeners, and we're not just screening our kindergartners, we're also screening our current first graders who were kindergartners last year and missed the opportunity to be screened. So we're catching everybody up. So that's kind of it mostly in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, let me know. Oh boy. Sammy?
Thank you. So I want to say thank you for the explanation. I think you addressed many of the questions that I had, but since this is the milestone where we provide our report to the public, I wanted to put it on record and the minutes to document our understanding of essential skills assessments and graduation requirements. My understanding is that we still require students to finish credits, and they, if they graduate and complete their credits, then they will satisfy the essential skills that we are aiming for them to have. So I just want us to be on the record to say, yes, that's what we do. And that's our standard for graduation remains as high as it is.
Yes, our standard still remains with the number of credits in particular categories for graduation. That is still something that's happening for our students. The essential skills requirement was removed by the state legislature as they're taking a look at essential skills and whether or not there's something that they should continue into the future. So there's going to be more conversation about that throughout this school year. And I understand maybe a report or something by the start of next school year about essential skills and their importance to our kids. So we're just kind of waiting around for that.
Thank you.
Vince?
So first, I want to say that I really appreciated this report because I remember doing PE with my then second grader and doing yoga and all sorts of other odd dancing things because we were all kind of hunkered down and isolating together. So thank you for that experience and that great memory. I also want to highlight that this is another case of how this district team just does not present this board with surprises. There were no surprises in this report. We knew exactly what was coming, and sure enough, here it is. And I just want to appreciate that and how unique that is, among school districts. My question is that based on my read of the corrective measures, the anticipation is that we will be in full compliance this year. Is that accurate?
That is my expectation for this report. 1 year from now, we will be in full compliance with all of the Division 22 standards.
That's it. That was my tough question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shauna.
Thank you. I have two questions, and first just want to share gratitude for just how organized this report is. As Vince said, there were no surprises based on what's been communicated along the way. And I really appreciated that with each note of something that was out of compliance, the corrective action is really clearly laid out in terms of what will be happening in the coming year to move things back into compliance. And the two questions I had were, one, is there a consequence of being out of compliance from the side of ODE? Or
So
we need to be aware of?
We have to send our corrective action to ODE, and they have to say, yes, that corrective action needs to be put in place. We agree with your corrective action, go forward and do it, and then we make sure that we get it done. So that's kind of the consequence as far as that's concerned.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. And then my other question was here, just in looking at the requirements around presenting this to the community, where it's noted here that by presenting the report to the school board of the district, which we're doing here in an oral presentation at an open public meeting, allowing for public comment, and by posting the report on the district's webpage. I know that we had public comment tonight, but it was noted specific to the Student Investment Act. And so I'm wondering if there's going to be another meeting where the public has the opportunity to comment, or if that public comment is accepted through the form of email or other communications only, just so that if folks are listening and do want to comment, know the avenues to do that through.
I was anticipating that we would be taking public comment through the through email after people had a chance to read it, digest it, and then ask those questions, that we would take those comments that way. But I know we do have one more meeting before this is actually due to the state. So I can have a conversation with Kim about making sure that public comment is open at that meeting for this report.
Next week it is.
It is. Okay, there you go.
It's confirming. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lily.
I just wanted you to help clarify for oops, my Zoom disappeared. Okay, there it is. To help clarify for the community, because I think sometimes there's a lot of anxiety around when it says out of compliance around assessment. Can you clarify that the compliance has to do with state assessments, and the follow-up to that is there is still assessment happening to gauge learning? But
absolutely.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, because if you just read it and you don't know that nuance, you might be like, what? How do we know where the students are? So if you can clarify, like, that might be helpful, even if you're thinking about like any wording that where the report goes.
Absolutely. So the place where we're out of compliance is with state testing, which includes OAKS testing, smarter balance testing, so those two categories, and also extended, what is it? It's extended assessment for our students with disabilities.
Yeah.
So those are the three areas where we're out of compliance. Those are big statewide assessments. We're not, as a district, we were checking in and taking in what our students were doing throughout the year, adjusting and monitoring, and making sure that our students were receiving the instruction that they needed throughout. And our students also received report cards, and our students received credits for the work that they were doing. So there was a lot of that assessment that's happening on a local level, in a classroom, at a building, in a school.
Thanks, Melissa. I think that's helpful because even in the areas where it doesn't specifically call out each assessment name, that way folk know. So I appreciate you clarifying for everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And they can also find that information in previous board minutes from the discussion that we had when the board took action to put us in advance of those tests for the year.
Thanks. Therese?
Thanks, Sarah. A question and a comment. My question is around dyslexia screening. So you mentioned that the first graders this year are being screened because of the remote learning of their kindergarten year. I am wondering about the second graders this year who had their kindergarten year interrupted with the pandemic, and what special attention we might be giving to them, realizing that it's entirely possible that in October of their kindergarten year, they may not have presented yet with things we would be noticing, but then the entire spring that they would have had in, with a classroom teacher, they did not. And so I'm just curious about what supports we're providing our second graders around that screening. I'll wait and then I'll make my comment.
Okay, so the good news about the STAR assessment for elementary is it's K through 5. So the STAR assessment that we use and to do the universal screening for dyslexia is the same as those markers for dyslexia are built into the STAR assessment that assesses a larger array of reading skills. And so all of our students are doing that K5, and that window's open right now. So we are seeing where our second graders are. And I think we talked about this when we talked in May about foregoing state assessments. How the question was, well, how are we going to know where our kids are at when they come back and what we need to provide them? And we talked a lot about the STAR assessment, which really gives you some great data as far as what our kids are doing, how they're doing, and where their their gaps are. So that will be happening for all kids K5. And as far as second grade is concerned, we can take a look at those skills as well. But and those will be the kind of the purview of the RTI, or response to intervention teams, that exist at every elementary school, taking a look at testing, talking about students individually, and making plans for intervention.
Okay, thank you. That helps to clarify, because I do know that STAR is happening for all of our kids, but I guess I was a little confused when you called out specifically the first graders, that maybe there was some additional element that was being paid attention to, that was being applied to our first graders in addition to the kindergartners. So I appreciate that clarification. And then my comment is just related to our reporting and our dangerous situation of being in a full compliance next year. How that's crazy. That when that happens, I would really love to see our district really promote public engagement in sharing that and celebrating that, in recognizing that to get there, having had what will at that time be 3 school years that have been touched by the pandemic, the capacity to get to that just speaks volumes of the organization and effort of our district leadership and the classroom teachers who are working really hard. And so when that happens next year, I would really like that I think it would be good for our community if that came in the form of a really, really public way, public engagement, an open house, if we can have one, a virtual open house if we can't, something along those lines, but something just a little bit that really calls out what how impressive that is, because honestly, even outside of a pandemic, we haven't had 100% compliance. And so this is really important for the community to understand with the efforts that it's taken to get there. So anyway, I just think we should celebrate it when we get to report that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Therese. Thinking about this report and this sort of angst of seeing things not in compliance, and then thinking about the reason we're not in compliance is because we as a board decided to not have the district do those state level tests last year. And that, I agree with Lou that created some angst because a lot of people worried about knowing where our kids are. And so I think the assurance that we're still going to know where our kids are is very helpful. And I still think that not doing those state tests last year in our few precious weeks of in-person learning was really the right decision for our kids. So I think it's worth being out of compliance in those few categories to have allowed our kids to just be in school.
Yeah.
We don't question that at all.
No.
Yeah, no, that was more for the people watching.
And this is more in support of your.
So do I hear a motion? Vince?
I move to approve the Division 22 report for submission to Oregon Department of Education and to be published on the district website.
Right here, a second.
Second.
It has been moved by Vince and seconded by Therese that we approve the Division 22 report for submission to the State Department of Education. Is there any final discussion? No, seeing none, then we will have our vote. Therese, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vince, what is your vote?
Aye.
Shauna, how do you vote?
Aye.
Hui, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Sammy, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote aye, passes unanimously. Thank you, Melissa, and all the team who put that report together and did that work. So our final, oh no, it's not our final. I'm just ready to move on. Next item on our agenda is board policy DA fiscal policies with Olivia. So
I don't have any additional reporting other than what was included in the cover to the board. I believe this is just a routine review of the board to examine the policy and to provide feedback if you have any desire to modify it at this time.
is any Vince?
So I'd just like to say that I very much appreciate the work that this board has done with policy DA. Over the number of years that I've been on the board, it really reflects the sober and very risk-averse approach that this board and this district take to fiscal matters. I particularly appreciate the level of reserves that this district and this board have chosen to retain. The reserves were crucially important for the retention of staff during the Great Recession, and I strongly recommend that we maintain our reserve levels as they are.
Sammy, did you have a comment?
Just want to say exactly what Vince said. He said everything on my mind.
Okay, do you have anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I always see this as sort of the kickoff of our budget process, because it's an important conversation for us to have as we begin to think about maintaining those reserves. So while there's no action, it just informs us that that's still the commitment of the board as we begin that process. So I think it's in some ways it's a bookend.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then let us move on to our, the next item, which is our enrollment update.
And Olivia is going to take us through this as well.
I provided some preliminary information in the report to the board that's included in the agenda attachment, but wanted to provide some more detail, information to the board and some of the observations we've made along the way. So starting with overall enrollment in the district. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm used to running my own shows. Keep going. All right, here we go. So total enrollment by grade, you can see district-wide, we're serving as of October 1, 6,404 students. Our enrollment by grade level varies throughout the district. Our highest class sizes are definitely at the high level between grades 8 through 12. All of those classes have more than 500 students in them. And below 8th grade, we only have one class that has more than 500 students. Obviously, our long-term enrollment projections for the district are indicative of some significant decreases in enrollment overall. So we anticipate that over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see our enrollment decline between 400 and 500 students. And we also don't anticipate our kindergarten grade class being much larger than what we've been experiencing. Since 2016, birth rates in the state of Oregon and locally have decreased every year, year over year since 2016. So I think we'll continue to see smaller kindergarten grades, and next year we may likely see a kindergarten class of less than 400 students. So that's something we obviously monitor, and as students matriculate through our system, kind of keep track of what that looks like. So we've got our eye on that bubble that we have at the 5th grade level right now, sort of replacing the bubble at the 8th grade level when we think about our middle schools next year. Next slide. So this just shows the enrollment by school in the district. You can see that when you look at our elementary schools, they vary. Our smallest elementary school is Mountain View with 260 students this year. And our largest elementary school is currently Garfield, but we have about 3 elementary schools that are right around that 380 mark. And you can see the middle school enrollment varies significantly. That's a recurring trend. And obviously with our high schools, CHS continues to be a little bit larger than CV. This report includes the enrollment of our new Corvallis online school at 177 students and 98 students at Muddy Creek on October 1st. Next slide, please. I know last year we reported on our enrollment in Corvallis online by resident school. We had a lot of students in this program last year, but you can see enrollment in Corvallis online is fairly proportionate across our schools. There's not any, really one school that makes up a bigger portion when you think about our school sizes overall. Next slide, please. And keep going. So when we look at our enrollment and the number of kids we're serving right now, we're serving less students than we did last year. And we're serving quite a lot less students than we did 5 years ago. And when we look at 10 years ago, we're very close to the enrollment levels that we had 10 years ago. So you can kind of see we had an increase in enrollment, and now we're sort of on this downward trend. Next slide. So just looking at the enrollment by grade. This is going to vary significantly when you have kind of bubbles in your system and as they work through the system. So you can see our 5th grade class right now is our big class, and you can see how they've sort of matriculated through our system when you think about 5 years ago and those bigger class sizes. So we're not seeing anything too unusual other than the 5th grade class. On the next slide, the secondary numbers again. 10 years ago, we had a really large 9th grade class, and that class obviously has matriculated through our systems. But other than that, we don't see anything too drastic, although our 11th and 12th grade classes continue to show that they increase over time between when students start in 9th grade and when they graduate after 12th grade. Next slide shows our enrollment by school. So this kind of helps identify our schools that are seeing increasing enrollment or decreasing enrollment. And you can see that some kind of go back and forth, some like Adams and Garfield. Bessie Coleman Elementary obviously is experiencing a decline, as is Catherine Jones Harrison Elementary. And then we have schools like Lincoln that look fairly stable, compared to 5 and 10 years ago. And Mountain View has gotten quite a bit smaller than what it was 5 and 10 years ago. But for the most part, other than Bessie Coleman, Catherine Jones Harrison, and Mountain View, our elementary school enrollments are fairly stable from one year to the next. Next slide is the secondary schools. And again, this is actually, pretty stable when you look at our secondary schools and enrollments from 5 and 10 years ago. It doesn't really look all that much different for these schools at all. The next slide. Let's talk about actual enrollment compared to what we projected for the year. So we were way off on our projections. Which isn't necessarily too surprising considering we weren't quite sure what to expect this year. Overall, we had projected 6,573 students. Our total number of students we're serving currently is 6,404. So we're serving about 170 kids less than what we had planned to. And you can see grade by grade. Across our K-5, every grade level is lower than what we had projected. Middle school, not quite as much, and high school actually is higher than what we had projected. Our kindergarten class is where we saw the biggest change, where our actual kindergarten class was 60 kids less than what we had anticipated it to be. So we'll be deep diving into more of this information because we're starting to develop our enrollment projections for next year. So those projections are due to the state each year in December. So in a matter of a couple of weeks, we'll begin our work on enrollment projections for next year. The next slide talks about or shows enrollment by school projected versus actual. And again, every elementary school serving less students than what we had anticipated. Middle schools as well, they're both serving less. Our high schools are actually serving more kids, or miraculously Corvallis High School was exactly as we projected it. I don't have a magic 8-ball for that one, but it worked out. And Corvallis Online, we did not project enrollment for this school. When we built the enrollment projections last December, we didn't even know that we were going to continue the Corvallis Online option. So we started with a 0 projection and currently serving 177. Muddy Creek is also experiencing, again, similar to what we are experiencing in our district schools as well, less students than anticipated. And then the last thing I wanted to show, which kind of ties these two things together, the next slide then shows sort of what our raw student teacher ratios are. These numbers aren't necessarily class size because it's just purely based on our enrollment numbers and our FTE that's budgeted for these schools. But obviously our ratios are lower than what they usually are. And that's because our enrollment was lower than what we projected, and we have not modified our staffing levels. We didn't lower our staffing levels because of that. And so you can see across the board at the elementary level, our average student teacher ratios are in the low 20s. And that continues even through our high schools, where we still are in the mid 20s with our student teacher ratios. So those are things that, again, when we start to build the budget for next year, we anticipate sort of starting over. Our target ratios at the elementary level are 24. So we're not way off. It won't require a ton of adjustment, but we will be looking at that moving forward just to maintain a sustainable level of staffing that aligns with the actual number of students we're serving. So that is the end of the slides I have. And if there's, Ryan has a comment or question.
Two comments. The first one is I've spent the day with superintendents across our region, and this is the norm. This isn't an outlier. This is pretty common across the state in terms of enrollment that folks see. So just kind of keep that in mind when we think about the funding per ADM and how basically the support, financial support per ADM will probably go up across the state because there's fewer students enrolled statewide. The second thing is that I also, our student to teacher ratio is really great. And I want to highlight that because this is the year when you want it to be great, because it is also a year where students are coming back to us after having been through the pandemic, as you all are well aware. So while the numbers there's some concern with those numbers, there's also some commonality in terms of what we see statewide, and also if we're going to have a year of that kind of ratio, this is the year to have it.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Vince?
So when I look at this data, I'm really, it gives me pause. Of course, you know, it doesn't give me pause with anything to do with the district or your responses to it. I'm not concerned about that we weren't able to accurately predict. What I'm really concerned about, and it's really that total enrollment by grade and that decline going down in grade levels. And so I'm not really talking to district staff here. I'm talking to my colleagues on the board. My sense is that this is a structural problem with our community. More and more, our community is not welcoming to families simply because people can't get housing. And I just jumped online to look at, you know, median prices. Did a couple sources. One reported average sale price of $442,000. Another one was the Zillow said $471,000 average sale price for a home. So this data really just stands out as a real warning sign. And so I think we have a role to advocate in our community. And I know that we have some housing developments slated, but I'm concerned that they are not going to be at a pricing level that's going to be approachable for families. And so for folks who are watching this video or online with us right now, you know, take this as a warning that our community is in trouble. And if we want it to be welcoming to families, we're going to have to make some policy changes to make that happen.
Lou?
I was just gonna mention for this, I think that there was a lot of question of how many people would come back, either in person or online or in general. And I know that the numbers are down, but I don't think it's as bad as it could have been. And I wanted to recognize that, especially if it's a trend across the state. And I'm also thinking about how many folk may have not came back to Corvallis that may have been here before because they moved or they were working remotely for various employers in the county and in the district area, and they just didn't come back. If they left because of the reasons that Vince already mentioned, so I don't have to repeat that, but it's hard because we know what these numbers mean as far as like enrollment and budgets and stuff like that. And it's hard to have something that we can tangibly do to address it. And I just wanted to recognize that I hope that we can address some of those structural issues that Vince has already brought up, among others in town, including like the climate for folk that, because it is a predominantly white town. And so I know that has to do with some of the reason why people leave, and have known several colleagues that have left because of climate in town. And so I think that there's a lot of factors that are completely out of our control, and I wanted to recognize that, and say like it's not as bad as it could have been. But I do appreciate you doing all these number crunchings for us, Olivia, because I like reading them. Like I was like, ooh, when I get to this. But I know you do a lot of work in behind the scenes, so thank you. And thanks for helping us make sense of what that means as far as like projecting into the future too for the district.
Shauna?
Thank you. And thank you, Olivia, for taking the time to go through this with us, to share the report in advance, as well as to prepare a presentation to share with us. I'm just really grateful for you for doing that. And I get excited in seeing and diving into the numbers, as some of my other colleagues do as well. You mentioned that a next step was doing a little bit of a deep dive into trying to understand maybe some of the differences between the actual and the projected. I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what that process might look like, or the types of things that you might be looking into to help understand some of those differences as you think about projecting for next year.
Yeah, when it comes to enrollment projections, we spend most of our time really focused on the kindergarten number. When kids go from one grade to the next, we always have a lot of historical context there, and it's generally a lot easier to predict what that looks like. For example, we always see our 9th grade class is always bigger than the previous year's 8th grade class, because we historically have students that enroll in our high school that may have attended like a private school or been homeschooled through 8th grade. So there's historical aspects that we apply from one grade to the next, but kinder is always tricky, because while we have a lot of birth rate data, we look at the statewide number, we look at county and zip code data and sort of try to translate that, to 6 years later and what that looks like. And because the birth rate has declined quite a bit, and because it doesn't necessarily mean that, if someone had a baby in Corvallis, 5 years ago, that they're still here right now, and that 6-year-old's going to enroll next year. So that's usually where we have the most challenging time. And so we just look at how that birth rate data translates to our actual kindergarten class over like the last 10 to 15 years to try to figure out like what are some averages or some trends that help us with that. And I think we anticipated a lot. We kind of added to our projection this year for kindergarten, thinking that there were students that maybe delayed the first year of school because of the pandemic, but I don't think that actually happened. And I think that's why our kindergarten number was so off. I don't think there was as much delayed enrollment as we had thought there would be. We continue to see homeschool numbers that are a little higher than normal, and that's the same as last year. But I would say that having our Corvallis online option has definitely made a difference in districts where they did not continue to offer a comprehensive distance learning option. I think those districts actually suffered a greater enrollment loss on average. And so there's a lot of positives in all of it. And going back to what Brian said, we know that statewide, there's a general decline in enrollment. The funding level doesn't change, so the per student amount will probably go up. So we haven't attempted to project what the change in enrollment means for our bottom line, because actually the state's updating those estimates right now. They just allowed districts to go in and update their enrollment projections. And so we used our October 1 numbers and updated our projections. And as long as the majority of districts do that work, when the state recalculates those estimates in a couple of weeks, I think we'll have a better understanding, but we don't anticipate it being a huge issue. So for the most part, enrollment projection is very technical exercise, except for kindergarten. It becomes more of, you can start by throwing darts and then you just talk to a lot of different people and run all your methodologies by them and get everyone's opinion and then just decide on a number and stick with it. And budget for reserve FTE, because if we end up having more kids than what we planned, we have a way to deploy those resources really quickly.
Thanks, Olivia. That's really helpful. And you also answered my other question just around whether or not this impacted sort of the bottom line and the budget. And then you also touched on some of the intersectionality too. I know, Lou, you were referencing that earlier in terms of thinking about some of the blended identities of students. And as you were sharing, Olivia, it got me thinking too, in terms of, I noticed that Catherine Jones Harrison, for instance, was a little bit lower in enrollment prediction, and thinking about students in life skills programs who it may have been harder to come back, and maybe going online also was not a good fit. And so thinking about some of those just challenges families are experiencing in making that decision to come back or when to come back. Thank you.
Right.
The other thing I think is worth noting is the projection for Linus Pauling versus the actual for Linus Pauling. And as we've had lots of conversations about boundaries in the past, I think that's just important data for the board to be aware of.
Sammy?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask about the 169 students less, how does that translate, but in terms of money, but I think I'm comfortable with that uncertainty because of the big pot from the state is going to determine that more than anything else. Vince and Shauna's and Lou's comments really made me realize something important here. I think we need to share this report with the city council, mayor, and commissioners. With permission of the board, if Kim Ryan or myself send it, I would like to share that. A little bit of perspective here frequently from land use hearings and comments and people who wants to lobby for against land use or development. They claim that we don't have capacity for schools, so we should not develop more. We don't have capacity for kids in schools, so we should not develop more. And that's a myth. Data here shows it very clearly. Our doors are open and we want to welcome more kids. Actually, we are pricing out to people. So I think this data is so important to share. And I think that we need to really be transparent with that, as we are, but have the city council and our partners in the county as well share that with developers, share that with during hearings or after hearings during deliberations. So the community is aware about the facts. One thing I realize also is we need to vaccinate our kids as soon as possible. It is a personal choice of every parent and every kid, but that personal choice for entering the school is going to exclude people from coming back. And we're seeing the impact of that personal choice into people maybe choosing not to go back and being not only priced out of school, but also not feeling safe in school. So we gotta have a conversation, continue to have the conversation. And Ryan, your recommendations, I think, puts us on the right track in terms of communication, education, outreach. And this is another lens to look at it. Where's our enrollments and how can we make sure we get back on track? And is vaccination part of it? And as Shauna mentioned, maybe that's an element why we have some schools are less than others. With that, I have a question. Do we know for Bessie Colson or Catherine Johns Harrison, do we know why it is really significant drop? Is there any trends that we know of? Is it the location? What is it that's we have a huge drop?
I wouldn't say they've had a huge drop. They've been regularly declining for the last 5 years each year. I mean, so we anticipated that those enrollments would look like they currently look. And for those specific neighborhoods, I think it's just that age group of kids in that neighborhood are starting to reach that middle school and high school age group. And so, and in particular, even though there may be, new developments or new construction in those areas, historically, when you look at our enrollment, 5 years ago, and you look at it now, there has been a substantial number of housing units added in the last 5 years. And obviously that doesn't always correlate to students. And I'm sure most of that has to do with the price point. But for those neighborhoods in particular, we anticipated that those school enrollments would be decreasing. In particular at Bessie Coleman, they had a really large 5th grade class last year and a large 5th grade class the year prior to that as well. So sometimes you can see that coming. And that's been the case for those two schools.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. I was thinking about vaccination too. And one of the things that happened this year as this summer, June, we finished feeling like they're going to be vaccines, things are going to look up, and then Delta hit, and the sort of atmosphere was very different when school started, and there was a lot of anxiety about sending kids back to school and going back to school full time. So I think that's, and then I also was interested that, high schools are high, those kids are old enough to get vaccinated. Elementary schools are low, we're losing more students. And those kids aren't old enough to get vaccinated. So that's an interesting thing.
We were receiving a lot of calls right at the beginning of school, or a week or 2 weeks before school started, and just trying to better, make a final decision for families. So there was some of that as well.
Yeah. Lou?
Yeah, that's not surprising with the impact on that anxiety decision. I was just gonna remind folk, like, we can do all we can, but some of it's still going to be out of our control. Like, literally a lot of younger people are choosing not to have kids, very specifically for things like climate change, affordability. It does cost a lot of money and people understand that. And so I want us to be like aware that is a trend too, about like family planning, especially with folk that may be having younger kids that will be entering the schools. And so I think it's just a really complicated conversation, and it's good to have the convo, and like some of it we're just not going to be able to control, and that's okay. And we can do the best we can. And thank you, Olivia. Like Sammy, that was in my mind too, like the numbers thing. So it's helpful to know, like, we'll still be able to serve the students, and teachers have jobs and staff have jobs to deliver the services. And if anything, maybe they'll have a little bit more one-on-one time or something in the future. But for now, we're at where we're at. And yeah, I just want to bring that other piece of reality into the conversation, because it is happening. I hear about it all the time.
Yeah. Well, I sort of feel like having the low teacher to student ratio this year is good for students who missed a year and a half of school, and it's also good for our staff members who are, this is a hard school year, and so to have lower ratios is probably beneficial to them this year too. Anything else on this topic.
So this appreciation for Olivia putting it together for us and helping us to stay focused on it.
Yeah, it's interesting information for a board that likes to look at data.
Yeah.
So thank you, Olivia. And so we will move on to our final agenda item, which is board member comments. Anyone have any comments this evening? Vince?
So I was reviewing another district's school board meeting, and I watched a superintendent literally break down in the middle of the meeting, talking about the stresses on teaching staff and staff in general. And I just want to bring to the board's attention a conversation. So Shauna and I got to have a small group meeting with the superintendent last week, and this very topic came up, that this is just a really tough time for education. We are in our second year of the pandemic, and the pressure and the stress on staff, it couldn't be greater right now. And so out of that conversation, Shauna had this great idea that, that we should partner, to show our appreciation and support for our educators and our staff and our schools. And so the superintendent moved very quickly and got us a meeting with the director of the Chamber of Commerce. And so I just wanted to surface this for the board, because we are going to have a role to play in this. But I think it's time that we all pull together and do what has been done for frontline workers, for healthcare workers. And now it's time for our education workers to get some support, the support that they need, because they're doing tremendous work for our kids. And so I'm just letting folks know. And Shauna and Ryan, if you want to share in that, and give some more details, that'd be great. But there'll be more information coming.
Thank you, Therese.
Thanks, Sarah. A couple things. First, I wanted to give a shout out to bicycle education folks. They had it at Garfield for 5th grade. I think it was last week. And so every morning I would see little pools of 5th graders learning how to make left-hand turns coming down my street. Made me very happy. So thanks to the staff who are working hard to make that happen and doing it without volunteers, because we don't have volunteers in our schools right now. So, so fantastic that they were able to pull it off. The kids really loved it. I heard a lot of joyous squeals from little kids riding by. Also heard more than one time when somebody hit the brakes, maybe inappropriately. And so just proves that we need bicycle education. So thank you very much for offering that. And then I wanted to just take a moment to respond to some themes that came out in emails this week from folks. So the first thing I wanted to say is I really appreciate last week when we had our meeting, I shared that I was concerned by the number of references in emails coming that had that used racist references to the COVID outbreak. And I didn't see any new ones this week. And so I really appreciate. And I know some people who emailed last week emailed this week too. And so thank you. If you know who you are, you were more intentional, I hope on purpose, but if not, please still know that it did get noticed. I think in all of the emails, there was like one link that used terminology that we had called out last week. So anyway, so thank you, community, for being attentive to that, either by monitoring your posting and your editing, or by withdrawing so that you didn't have to. Either way, our inboxes just didn't have references to such racist overtones, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you. And the last thing I wanted to note was we got communications this week related to the discussion last week around outreaching and the plan for increasing awareness and community engagement related to vaccines. It was implied or outright stated in a couple of correspondences that that plan assumes that people, communities of color are somehow unable to understand this information or get this information for themselves. It seems like it's an overt statement that they're not educated. I want to just clarify that that's not at all what this plan is about. The plan to participate in community engagement is not because of any assumption that people can't understand information or don't know where to get it. It's a couple of things. One is it's a response to a state and national trend. We aren't making up numbers around where vaccination rates fall. Vaccination rates are lower among particular communities in Benton County, in Oregon, and in the country. And I'm not going to say that I understand all of the reasons behind why that is. I'm going to say that that's a concerning trend, and we want to make sure that we're taking every effort and as an entire community, that we don't leave any unanswered questions out there, that we don't leave any unanswered or unknown resources for responding to the pandemic. We want to make sure that everybody knows how they can get those. But it isn't, it's not a statement about what people are capable of understanding or whether they're willing to go out and get information. It's about that COVID just really doesn't care. It's not concerned with any of our ethnic or racial backgrounds. It is going to go where it can find a host. And if there are communities that have more opportunities for hosts, they are potentially more vulnerable. And they are my neighbors. They are my colleagues. They are my children's classmates and their families. And so it matters to me because I would like to see as many people in our county and in our schools come through this and still be here with us in the months and the years to come. And that is going to involve some education. It is evident from community conversation that the education is not just for communities that aren't getting vaccinated, that are getting vaccinated at lower rates. It's for a bunch of people right here, identities I am part of, who are also not only not getting vaccinated, but sharing misinformation. And so to those who are knowingly sharing misinformation, I'm asking you to please stop sharing misinformation because it isn't helping any of us. We can participate in actual dialogue, but there really isn't room in this community response for misinformation. So I just wanted to point that out. And so if you emailed on those topics and I haven't had a chance to reply to you, I hope you're listening or review this because I'm hoping to have you hear this now. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Luke.
Thanks, Therese, for hitting on all those points. And I had two points I wanted to bring up. One of them is related to some of the stuff Therese said, so I'll start with that one. I noticed an interesting trend today. Was it today? I don't know what day it was. It was sometime this week since our last meeting in looking at OSU's COVID dashboard, because as the community should be well aware by now, I like looking at those kind of things. But they're out of I didn't do the math until earlier though, out of the over 4,000 tests that OSU has administered, they only had 58 positive cases, and that's Bend and Corvallis, but they also have a 93 and 94% vaccination rate among students and faculty, staff, respectively. And so I noticed that correlation when we were talking about the numbers last week with Benton County numbers and how the numbers of students testing positive are a lower rate overall than like the county. And so I'm noticing this trend, which hopefully the community understands what that trend means, is that the students in the Corvallis School District are also vaccinated at, I think it was 10% higher than the county rate. Isn't that what it was? Something like that. And it's showing in the numbers that the higher those vaccination rates get, the less cases are going to start popping up. And so I hope that as a community, OSU is part of the Corvallis community, but they can't carry the entire weight of the community. And so I hope as a community, we can get to that 93, 94% rate and continue to see those numbers significantly lower with our positive cases, because regardless of what people think, people that some of us know, including myself, are still dying and getting very ill. And so I think that the more we can take responsibility as a community to help with that. We'll continue to see those numbers go down and the kids and the students in our district be at less risk, as well as their families and the staff. And so I hope folk understand what those numbers mean, because it means a lot. And I seen that correlation. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the trend that we've seen with the data about the district and the numbers. And so, okay, I will stop with my vaccine plug. Please understand that the numbers are telling us a story that we should listen to, community. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up has to do with some things that I've been hearing amongst young people in the district about comments being said and climates created in the classrooms that sound a little bit concerning. And hopefully we'll have some updates from SAFE in the future about some of that information. But I am a little bit concerned about what I've heard so far, how early on we are. And I hope we can continue as a district to work on addressing racialized and gendered and identity-based what leads into bullying, and hope we can get to a different place where those comments aren't being made. And yeah, I'll stop at that, but I would love to have a deeper conversation as a board about this in the future, and I hope we can do that.
Thank you, Lynn.
One more thing. Thank you for all your work, everybody, and to my colleagues too for your work in the community.
Thank you. Sammy.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. If it's okay, I have some comments, but I want to share some thoughts for the last thing Lou mentioned, is that we encourage folks who might share things like this to look at All Students Belong and also the bias incident form, so they could engage with the form if they feel comfortable with that. That will help the district to collect data, respond, and prevent, hopefully. And other than that, I have some comments. One of them, after I heard Therese mention the comments, I want to publicly claim responsibility and apologize for my colleagues for being a little bit late on the board chair acknowledgement of the emails. And community members, if you haven't heard from any board member yet, it's my fault because I have to reply first, acknowledging the email, and I'm going to get to it really quick. So I apologize, and I promise you I'm going to get to them really quick. But if that's an indication of one thing, is how really great community engagements we're having. Lots of people reaching out about so many things, and we're reading them one by one. So really thank you for our community members for reaching out and emailing us. And on engagement, I wanted to share some thoughts about the vaccine conversations, and ditto to everything has been said about it. In the past week alone, I had really strongly emotional conversations with people, whether it's constituents, friends, family members, or even Oregonians, from all the way from Malala to Lincoln County, all the way from people who say, how dare you not having a mandate right away? You should have voted on a mandate, to people who thought that we voted against the mandates and they want to know how they can implement such a thing. So of course, I shared with them our recommendations and that we did not take an action on the mandate. But more than that, really had strong conversation around what does it mean to vaccinate, the spectrum of personal choice to collective responsibility of public health measures, and how that translates into people dying. As Lou mentioned, those are people we know close to us. Those are people like a family member who did not get to vaccinate until earlier last week or this week, and had a reaction, and adverse reaction, and survived that adverse reaction, and the doctors recommended a second dose, for a simple fact that the family member would have, with almost certainty, died if they had contracted COVID, and they were holding out until this week since the vaccine was available. So that was really emotionally hitting me close home. Conversations with friends who were exposed or secondhand exposed, or children exposed, developing symptoms. It's just really hard. And I think a friend who was really hesitant to have the conversation and started with this preamble, Sami, I'm your friend. I don't want to have this conversation, and you expect that you will change my mind. I will not change my mind. I had to really come with an open mind, and also, frankly, a surprise that I was having conversation closely with the person who was not vaccinated, and I thought there was a social contract about knowing if someone is not vaccinated. And that's helped me to protect myself. But at the same time, I felt really it's important for us to be open and to have people meet people where they are, so they can make an informed decision. That changes from one person to another. But I don't know what's the solution. I think the solution is individualized. Every person, we need to reach out to them and understand where they are to get them there. But also, as every solution and every approach should be individualized, I think as policymakers, we gotta do something. We cannot wait, and it's urgent. It's people's lives. It's our kids' mental and physical health, and our educators' mental and physical health. So just send me your thoughts. I'm really emotional about this week, in so many ways, and with that, I'll stop my comments. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, that, me, the Corvallis School Board, or Lou?
Sarah, sorry, Lou, I think your hand is up too. You go first.
I think your hand went up and then down, Therese, but okay, I feel like we need to and I know that it's such a solemn topic and it creates a lot of feels, and I just wanted to acknowledge all the positive things that happened this evening and the awesome bond updates and the partnership with the foundation and what that means to the community and the students we work with, and the resolution that we just passed tonight, and to not forget about the good work that we do as a board and that the community comes together behind, and that the staff works on too, and the partnerships we have. And so I just really wanted to end, like, this doesn't have to be the end, obviously Therese wants to say something, but I wanted to bring us back to that moment of, like, it's hard, and I don't want us to forget the positive pieces. And because I don't know how many people know this, but there's a lot that we read and we consider, and so to be able to highlight the positive pieces feels really good, because it is hard work to serve the community in this capacity beyond just these meetings that you see us on for the last 3.5 hours. So that's all. I just wanted to bring that up.
Therese?
I also wanted to end with an acknowledgement of obviously gratitude for the work of the board, but I specifically want to call out Sami and Sarah and Lou, who they carry the leadership role of our board. I don't think that anyone who is note to all of you out there who are just eager to run for the board next time, I want you to understand it's a lot of email. I just hope you realize it's a lot of email. And in the screen culture of Zoom that we live in right now, yikes, it's really a lot of email. But that said, I just am in awe of the work and the effort that Sami and Sarah and Lou put into the community engagement on behalf of the board. They carry a much, much heavier load than I do in terms of responding to people in the community. So, thank you for reaching out to us. Thank you for sharing and for wanting to engage. Thank you also for your patience, that we are mere mortals, and the three who are leading us in this effort are working really, really hard. And I just don't think that it feels really important to just acknowledge that as a board, so much of what we are able to do, these agendas that are filled with really important topics, these packets that get out to us, that happens because we have strong leadership in our board and they work closely with our district and they align with, and they spend hours, and that's not an exaggeration, hours of time in communication each week to make sure that the topics that we need to contemplate, we need to review, we need to have public discourse on, are making it in front of us. Those things do not just magically appear. There is no agenda elf that shows up and makes this for us. There are people behind that. And I am grateful for each of you. And so I appreciate, Sammy, that you want to acknowledge that it's taken longer than normal. But what I want to say to you is, anybody waiting on an email from you, it's worth the wait to give you the breathing room, because what you will respond with will be thoughtful and considerate. So if you're waiting, folks, hang tight, because you're going to get a response from somebody who's really doing their very, very best to make sure that we care for all of the constituents in our community. And so thank you to each of you for the work that you are doing.
Thank you, Sharice. And I want to also, we had lots of reports on this agenda today, and all of those things take staff time and people crunching numbers and pulling information. And so I want to appreciate the staff for the work that's done to get us information that we can digest and understand. Because that's, getting information out in a way that's understandable is a valuable thing, and I appreciate that it gets done. Anything else this evening? Hearing no more, the meeting of the Corvallis School Board is adjourned for the evening.